Welcome to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel with your top headlines from across the region. It's currently 7 a.m. in New York and 2 p.m. here in Israel. I'm Deborah Klein, and these are the latest developments coming to you live from Israel. It's another day of ceasefire violations by Hamas in Gaza. The IDF this morning confirmed the elimination of 3 terror operatives in 2 different incidents. In both instances, armed terrorists crossed the yellow line into the IDF-controlled area as per the ceasefire, thus violating the agreement and actively threatening troops on the ground. In the south of the Strip, Kfir Brigade soldiers eliminated a Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist by ordering airstrikes to target a gunman. A short time later, surveillance teams identified another terrorist approaching troops in southern Gaza. Soldiers of the Gaza Division's Southern Brigade opened fire and eliminated him. And in the north, the Air Force struck and killed a Hamas operative who the IDF says was preparing an imminent sniper attack against Israeli troops, publishing video footage of the strike. These recurring incidents reflect the current situation in Rafah. Dozens of Hamas terrorists still trapped underground, hiding in a tunnel on the IDF-held side of the Yellow Line. But for the first time in weeks, Israeli media reported a solution to the problem. In a proposal sent through mediators, Israel has offered the following: surrender, disarm, move to Israeli prisons, and later be released to Hamas-controlled Gaza. So far, the gunmen are refusing, and at this point, it's unclear whether Hamas chiefs can even get the message across to these trapped terrorists. And speaking of Hamas, in a disturbing development, Israel's defense establishment sends a sharp warning, claiming Hamas is quietly rebuilding its rule in the Gaza Strip, and much faster than many in the cabinet have realized. Senior defense officials told ministers that 13 of Gaza's 25 municipalities are back to full activity, once again run by Hamas. According to reports, Hamas police are redeployed at checkpoints, infrastructure is being repaired, and security sources say the organization has re-established its control in the minds of Gazans. Reports also confirm that Hamas has resumed checkpoint operations and is back to collecting taxes from truck drivers just as they did before the war. This rapid rebuilding is igniting new tensions between Jerusalem and Washington. The Trump administration is pushing ahead with the next phase of its 20-point plan for Gaza's day after, even as Israel warns that Hamas remains armed, entrenched, and deeply involved in local decision-making. With the U.S. struggling to assemble a multinational stabilization force, Washington is turning to interim solutions that Israel strongly rejects. Defense officials say the conclusion is clear. If the United States does not move to dismantle Hamas, Israel will have to. And according to the IDF, it's only a matter of time before a plan will have to be carried out. And the IDF's counterterrorism operation in Judea and Samaria is continuing and picking up speed. Just in the past night, IDF troops detained multiple suspects while searching for weapons in the Tubas area in northern Samaria. Raids were conducted in areas where intelligence suggests local terror groups attempted to establish presence. The operation details are now revealed. The raid begins with an airstrike directed by ground troops to isolate the area before allowing foot soldiers to enter alongside border police officers. The ground forces conduct searches and raids before detaining suspects and beginning interrogation. According to preliminary reports, the IDF and Shin Bet arrested or questioned 60 people. And in an interesting twist, among those detained and later released was Samir Basharat, the mayor of prominent Arab city Tamun. And joining me now to discuss all of these developments is Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves Advocate Maurice Hirsch, Director of the Initiative for Palestinian Authority Accountability and Reform in the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, and the former Director of the Military Prosecution for Judea and Samaria. Maurice, thanks so much for joining.
Hi, good afternoon. Good morning.
So Hamas, as we reported, is regaining power in a lot of areas in Gaza. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but what can possibly be done to combat this at this point?
Well, so I think we're seeing two very different areas in the Gaza Strip. We're seeing the area which is controlled by Israel, the 52% outside of the yellow line, where we're seeing really the IDF operating against Hamas, making sure that the terrorists in the tunnels in Rafah are actually either eliminated or arrested or somehow neutralized. And in that entire area, the Gaza Strip is operating Hamas free. Then you have the rest of the Gaza Strip, which, as we know, is seeing really a tremendous influx of humanitarian aid or so-called humanitarian aid, 4,200 trucks a week going into Gaza at the moment. And that is all being taken over by Hamas, which is reestablishing its control, reestablishing its governance systems throughout the Gaza Strip, again, providing for the Gazan people and being seen, as your report accurately suggested, being seen by the Gazans as the person or as the organization that now runs the Gaza Strip. This is something that we cannot in any way accept. Israel needs to either ensure that the United States puts together that international force to actually disarm Hamas, or we need to do it ourselves, because the alternative is just waiting and unfortunately not being the last war with the Gaza Strip, but rather another one of the cycles of violence, which then give birth to another cycle of violence down the road as Hamas regains control.
Right, and I actually want to continue on and touch on that, because what do we know as of right now about Hamas's popularity inside Gaza? Because say we do manage to successfully demilitarize the Gaza Strip and remove Hamas from power, what's preventing their ideology from sticking around, especially considering the fact that the Hamas schools and the education system and the camps and all of their education is still very much prevalent? I mean, how can we prevent future attacks and protect Israel's security if the ideology remains?
And that's really an integral part of the day after in Gaza. It's not only getting rid of the terrorists. It's not only ensuring that Hamas no longer has any governance capabilities at all in the Gaza Strip, but it's ensuring that the entire school curriculum, that the culture, that the socialization of the Gaza Strip is changed fundamentally. Now, they don't have to become Zionists. They can be, and there are other options that can be implemented. We at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs suggested way back in December 2023 that possibly the change that could be made is to implement the UAE school curriculum, for example, a curriculum which teaches tolerance, which provides for an ability for coexistence. It doesn't have to be either violent genocidal terrorism or Zionism. There are middle paths, and those should be implemented. But first and foremost, we have to ensure that Hamas is eradicated, because otherwise nothing else can work.
Right. And, as you say, we also have reports from recent days that mediators, so Turkey, Qatar, and all the acting bodies have actually met in Cairo to discuss ways to also maintain the fragile ceasefire, but also to continue to phase 2 of the plan. We also have Al Jazeera reporting this morning that searches have begun in Zaytun to locate the slain hostages that remain in Gaza. They are, of course, Israeli hostage Ran Gvili and Thai national Rintalak Sutisak. But do you think we'll be seeing these hostages returned at all? What is the incentive by Hamas to comply if they, keep getting away with these violations? And as long as we are in phase 1 and they can take their time to regroup, reestablish themselves, I mean, what's your take on all of that?
So I think we have to distinguish between the 2 points that you made. First and foremost, the Qatar and Turkey are not neutral actors. They are defenders of Hamas, and their continued involvement is of no benefit for either of the sides. It's only beneficial for Hamas itself. As regards the hostages, I've always argued that Hamas knows exactly where every single one of the hostages is. It isn't something which is random. And everything that they're doing now, the sporadic return of one hostage here, one hostage there, is designed to ensure that they continue putting pressure on the international community, and they put pressure on Israel as well. But really, they could have returned all of the bodies, all of the hostages, almost immediately. And really, everything that is being done now is just there to drag it out. They're seeing how resolute the will of the international community is, of Israel, of the United States, to ensure that they do comply. and as long as they give us a body every week, every 10 days, every 2 weeks, they believe that those lies that they're now going to Zaytun to possibly find another body will put off the inevitable. But in the meantime, they're using that time to reestablish themselves as the governance force in Gaza Strip and to prepare for the next cycle of violence. If we think that they are not now booby-trapping all of the rest of the buildings that haven't yet been attacked in preparation for the next cycle of violence, I think we're deluding ourselves. They are, unfortunately, a murderous group of genocidal terrorists, and their goal is simple: to destroy Israel, and they will do anything they can, even at the price, as we see it. But for them, really, the sacrifice of the lives of the Gazans, which they've been happy to throw into the path of any Israeli soldier on the way, that's part of their strategy. The more dead Gazans there are, the better it is for Hamas. That's how they see it, unfortunately. And that is, I believe, what we're going to see going forward.
But when the hostages, do get recovered and do come back, by the way, I happen to agree with you. I as well think that they know exactly where these bodies are and that it's all just a farce, that they're searching for them. But say that they do return the 2 remaining hostages. How do you foresee, is perhaps the IDF strategy or even Hamas's strategy changing? Because right now we're kind of in this, position of stalemate, of the waiting game, as you said. So how can we expect things to change once the hostages do come back?
Well, I fear that we won't see any tremendous change in what's going on in the Gaza Strip, at least in the. I think they will manage to drag out this hostage event for another few weeks, if not for another few months. I think there is great reticence, as we're seeing now in the international community, for any arms-bearing force to go into Gaza and to actually disarm Hamas. And they will use really the winter as an opportunity to regroup, to rebase themselves. We've seen the pictures from the Gaza Strip. There is no effective sewage really provisions at all now in the Gaza Strip, and any rain means that fighting in that territory, continuing on with any military operations, at least for the next few months, will be particularly hazardous. And so I think that that's their plan, to make it through the winter, use the winter for A, to stop Israel from coming in and finishing off the job, B, to promote pictures around the world of the so-called suffering of the Gazan people, which is self-inflicted, inflicted by Hamas, of course, but in order to really garner some type of support for their continued resistance, as they call it. And then by the time we get to the spring of next year, everyone will have forgotten about the fact that Hamas is really returning to full force. The push to rebuild Gaza, even at the expense of leaving Hamas in control of a small area, will, I fear, be driven forward no matter what, and without their disarmament. And so I fear that we are going into a situation, unless some drastic decisions are made, we're going into a situation where we are just preparing for the next cycle of violence, and we'll see the winter as really cover for Hamas.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, I'd like to actually pivot slightly now, as we're getting in some new reports of airstrikes being reported in Jenin, that's in Judea and Samaria. And, as we just reported earlier as well, the counterterrorism, operations are continuing. Maurice, can you explain a little bit about that front? Why is this front, the Judea and Samaria front, being so heavily focused on right now? What's the real threat?
So we have to take into account that the same genocidal terrorist groups operating in the Gaza Strip are operating in Judea and Samaria as well. In Judea and Samaria, paradoxically, maybe, they enjoy even greater support than they do in Gaza. Hamas, as everyone I'm sure will recall, in 2006, won more votes in Judea and Samaria than it even did in the Gaza Strip.
That's
and
right.
so you have Hamas, you have Palestinian Islamic Jihad, you still have the Iranian influence still trying to push them forward towards carrying out more terrorist attacks. We saw just a few days ago IDF reports of seizure of another large cache of arms designated for those terrorists operating in Judea and Samaria, being seized. So we have that constant push, and we saw obviously the terror attack just last week in Gush Etzion. This is something which is ongoing, and were it not for the active operations against terrorism in Judea and Samaria, I think we would be seeing ourselves more coming towards massive terror attacks than we've actually seen in the past. We saw just even part of the problem, obviously, being the fact that the Palestinian Authority is not only not operating against the terrorists, it's defending them and helping them. We saw with the fact that the terrorist who was killed just 2 days ago by the IDF forces after he had murdered 2 Israeli soldiers a year and a half ago, he had been in Palestinian Authority protective custody. That means they were looking after him to make sure that Israel wouldn't arrest him. We saw just 2 days ago also Palestinian security forces actively involved in gun battles against Israeli forces. So when you have the connection of the genocidal terrorist Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, together with and supported by the Palestinian Authority, it means that Israel really does have no choice rather than to take a very strong hand in Judea and Samaria, because they are planning the next October 7. Let us not fool ourselves about that. They are planning the next October 7 in Judea and Samaria. And the sooner we act to neutralize that threat, the better it will be for them and for us.
Absolutely. And, we are actually almost out of time, but just while I have you on, Maurice, I want to keep, expanding on what you said earlier about the Palestinian Authority, not only not working against these terrorists, but actually supporting them. Where do we stand right now with the quote unquote pay for slay, the system where the Palestinian Authority gives, physical money to terrorists after they commit terror attacks against Israelis? Where do we stand with that?
We have to listen to Mahmoud Abbas when he speaks in Arabic, when he says over and over again that if I'm left with just 1 penny in the coffers of the Palestinian Authority, I will pay it first and foremost to the terrorists. We just have to believe him. That's what he says. It's not just propaganda for him. That is his policy. That is Mahmoud Abbas's legacy going forward. And all the different lies that they put out in February, he issued a presidential order to cancel the payments. And then now we're seeing that he's issued another order to really stop the payments because they continued on despite his previous ostensible instruction. The Palestinian Authority pays salaries to terrorists because they see the terrorists as their employees. They are proud of them. They glorify them. They reward them. They incentivize them. Nothing in that will ever change. And there isn't a Palestinian leader on the horizon that will ever be able to change that after they've so entrenched it as part of their society. The only way forward is to dismantle the Palestinian Authority and to rebuild some type of other governance body there and that isn't made up of any of these people. The person that they're now touting to replace Abbas, Hussein al-Sheikh, is himself a terrorist. In 2001, suicide bombers on the way to attack in Jerusalem came into his office. They already had suicide belts. They already had everything they needed. And Hussein al-Sheikh reached into his office desk and pulled out 2 hand grenades and a wad of cash and said, "Go make sure that you kill the Jews." This is the person who is now going to be the next leader of the Palestinian Authority. This is untenable. If we see any future for the Palestinians, if we see any future for ourselves, we have to make that drastic change. It may hurt in the short time, but long term, it will save the lives of Palestinians and Israelis. And it's something that needs to be done sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I completely agree with your last statement. I think it's no secret that Israel is kind of lacking in partners that we can actually work with in the region. But we are unfortunately out of time. Colonel Lieutenant in the Reserves, Advocate Maurice Hirsch, thank you so much for speaking with us today and giving us your analysis.
Thanks for having me.
And in another development, Israeli intelligence has once again thwarted an Iranian plot against Israelis abroad. Now, according to reports, the Mossad, working closely with the African security forces, dismantled a Quds Force-led plan that targeted Israeli diplomatic sites in Uganda and Senegal. The plot involved a network of Pakistani and Bangladeshi agents operating from Iran, as well as local African recruits. They were tasked with surveillance, buying Western weapons, and preparing attacks. And authorities say the cell was caught before any damage could be done. Experts are pinpointing these cases as a show of the Islamic Republic's continuous investments in global terror operations. But Mossad and international partners have proven once again they can disrupt these plots early, maintaining Israeli security even far from home. Israeli intelligence has prevented a potential catastrophe in Africa, showing the global scope of the Islamic Republic's threats and Israel's ability to neutralize them. And we have breaking news reports. We have airstrikes coming out of Lebanon. The IDF is reportedly striking in Lebanon, and we don't have all of the details, but we will be sure to give them to you as soon as we have them. We have a slightly lighter and more positive and, dare I say, exciting development coming out of Israel that we'd like to discuss. 8 Israeli restaurants have been ranked among the very best in the world. Now, the ranking comes from the prestigious La Liste, one of the most respected global gastronomic rankings, which included Israeli cuisine in their top 1,000 restaurants around the world. This is a major milestone for the Israeli food scene and a massive international win, with 7 of the restaurants who made the list located in Tel Aviv, and 1 of them in Jerusalem. Topping the Israeli lineup is OCD in Tel Aviv, a tasting menu restaurant by chef Raz Rahav, which received the highest ranking in the country. Others include Mashia, Alina, Claro, Pastel and Papina in Tel Aviv, and Chakra in Jerusalem. And now we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with one of the chefs of one of these ranked restaurants. I'd like to welcome to the show Chef Ran Shmueli, who runs Claro in Sarona Complex. Claro follows a farm-to-table approach with a menu that's based on local seasonal produce. Ran, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, congratulations on this achievement, on this ranking. That's 77 points in the La Liste ranking. Could you share, what this ranking means for you today, and maybe also discuss some of the challenges that Claro has had to face over the past 2 years of war?
First of all, we're really, really flattered, and it's a bit surreal to talk about restaurants after all these breaking news. It's a hard work without wars, and wars makes it really, really harder. And Claro in Tel Aviv is really it's a big business. We have feeding about 2 million people since we've been open 13 years ago, and we have 150 employees. And it's quite a project. We are connected with more than 10 farmers. And we have a guy, Shlomo, who is driving all over with our car in Israel, collecting all the good stuff. And we're trying to keep on the good job. I feel it's a mission to all over the world that Israel is not only about war and terrorism. It's also about good food and culture. And I believe, we don't need to have wars, but we need to eat. We can't live without eating. So this is, I feel really, I feel lucky, and I feel that we are recognized in the world, and it doesn't go without saying.
Right. So can you share a little bit about this process of the ranking? I mean, was there a critic who came into the restaurant? Did you know that this was happening? Did you expect it at all? Walk us through that.
No, actually, 1.5 years ago, I met La Liste vice president. She's a woman, and we were talking about it, and she said they're trying to give it from another perspective, to choose the restaurants, not like the Michelin guide or the other guides. Uh, and actually, I didn't understand exactly what they're doing. Of course, we don't know when or who came to the restaurant. I don't think somebody particularly came for the restaurant. They are collecting all the reports, all the rates from people, from regular people, all the
Mhm.
everything was that was advertising, pictures, and so on, all over the media. And since Clara is feeding a lot of people, I think that's, and if I may say, we are serving good food, and the atmosphere is amazing, and the restaurant is really beautiful, as you can see in the pictures. So here we are in the list. By the way, the second year already.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. And the list that at least that came out this year, it's very interesting to me that 8 Israeli restaurants have made the list despite the wartime challenges. You say it's nice to know Israel not just for wars, but I think that that's incredibly impressive. And to me, that's a reflection of just sheer resilience. But perhaps there's just something great about Israeli cuisine, which is often seen as this meticulous blend of cultures and therefore flavors. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the inspiration behind Claro is and what type of cuisine you specialize in?
Yes. You know, at my beginning of my career, I wanted to bring Europe and international food into Israel. And then one day I started to walk on in the market. I started in Carmel Market, and then I went to all over the Israel. I'm talking about 25 years ago when I was 2 years old. And I realized that there's so much in Israel that we can work with, and that's where it's all started. And I'm not sure it's Klauer is not an Israeli restaurant. Klauer is a Mediterranean restaurant, collecting all the goods from all the Mediterranean shore, at least one part of it, and one side of it, and I don't know, as a chef, already I'm 41 years in the business, to see things are growing and then being served on the plates, that's the whole story. And I believe today a lot of people are doing good food, but you need to have a story. A story, by the way, is not only the food, is the plates you're serving in. We're trying to use as much as local artists to do our plates to and the atmosphere and the vibe, and of course the service, which is really homey. I think that's what helped us in the war, during the war, which unfortunately it's not over yet. By the way, we are kind of soldiers. We are here and we are always going to be here, and we're serving our customers. We opened in London 1 year ago. Uh, it's not the I'm not sure it's the best time in the year or in the world to open Israeli restaurants or Israeli connected restaurants in the world, but I think it's part of our missions as chefs, and if I may say, mature chefs, old chefs, uh, to spread all over our kitchen, our Mediterranean kitchen, which is a melting pot, of course, because people in Israel came from all over the world, and that's what makes the Israeli food or our part of the Mediterranean really, really interesting.
Absolutely. And like you say, the whole ranking system in and of itself is supposedly user-based, so that means that it was satisfied customers that put in the good word and ended up revealing this ranking.
I need to say thank you. I need to say thank you for those people who came to Clara during the last few years, which wasn't, let's not forget the coronavirus.
Mm,
And we went through a lot of problematic times, and the customer were there, we were there, and they really appreciate it. I was planting flowers when things were really sad,
mhm.
but I believe we I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. And that's my part. I can't,
Yeah.
I'm not in the army anyway, although I was in the
Mm.
army. And that's
But
that's part of
everybody
my
has their own role in the war, and everybody
exactly,
contributes in a
exactly,
certain way. And you're
exactly.
filling bellies and putting smiles on faces, so we absolutely love to see it. But we are out of time, so we had to have to cut the interview short. Baran Shmueli, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And just before we wrap up, just a quick reminder, it's Thursday, which means that Black Friday is tomorrow. So if you'd like to get some shopping done, now is the time. We're expecting big crowds at the mall, so just remember to stay safe and get those sales. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. I'm Deborah Klein, and thanks so much for watching. When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Caleb Ben David. Each week we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. In a targeted airstrike on Beirut, the IDF eliminates Hezbollah military chief Haitham Ali Tabatabai and 4 other top figures in the Iran-backed terror movement. Israeli forces on the Lebanese border go on alert, and the IDF holds a snap drill as Hezbollah vows retaliation, saying the strike crosses a red line. The remains handed over by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group from Gaza are identified as Dror Or, who was killed along with his partner Yonat at Kibbutz Be'eri during the October 7th attack, and his 2 children kidnapped and later returned. That leaves 2 deceased hostages, Ron Givli and Thai worker Suthasik Rinthalik, still held in Gaza. In 2 incidents, IDF forces eliminate 11 armed terrorists who emerged from tunnels in the Rafah area. In northern Gaza, soldiers in the 188th Brigade gunned down a terrorist approaching troops in a threatening manner amid ongoing clashes with Palestinians who continue trying to infiltrate the Israeli-controlled Green Zone of Gaza. Forces from the IDF's Duvdevan Commando Unit and the Shin Bet eliminate Sultan al-Khani, the terrorist who in August 2024 bludgeoned to death Gidon Perry with a hammer while he worked security at the Bar-On industrial area. Al-Khani was tracked down to a home near Jenin and killed in a shootout with Israeli forces. And now our big story. The Gaza war may officially be over, but there are on other fronts, the IDF continues to battle against the resurgent Hamas, against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and against terror factions in Judea and Samaria, and of course the Iranian octopus that stands behind them all. Yet even in the midst of all this, mounting tensions between the top political and security echelons threaten to complicate, perhaps even compromise this task. Defense Minister Israel Katz and IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir are publicly feuding to an unprecedented degree over military appointments, requiring the personal intervention of Prime Minister Netanyahu. But behind the discord is a far bigger issue: the open question of why Israel was so unprepared for the October 7th attack, how to best investigate that matter, and what conclusions need to be drawn. More in this report from Sivan Raviv.
The dismissals and decisions follow the findings of the Turjuman Committee, a panel tasked with reviewing the IDF's internal investigations into both operational and intelligence breakdowns before, during, and immediately after the October 7th assault. Among the most consequential moves, Major General Oded Basyuk, who headed the IDF Operations Directorate on October 7th, has been removed from reserve duty entirely. Major General Shlomi Binder, who led the Operations Division at the time and today serves as Chief of Military Intelligence, received a formal reprimand but will retire only at the end of his current term. Former military intelligence chief Major General Aharon Khaliva, one of the first to publicly accept responsibility, was dismissed from reserve service in a phone call. He reportedly told Zamir he still expects a full state commission of inquiry. And former Southern Command Chief Major General Yaron Finkelman, who resigned after the attacks but remained in service, will now completely end his military career and be removed from the reserves. More officers are also facing consequences.
כלל האנשים ששמם יקשר מעתה והלאה לאותם מסקנות אישיות הם טובי מפקדינו. כולם תרמו את מרבית חייהם לצה"ל ולמדינת ישראל. לרובם המוחלט יש נגיעה ישירה בהצלחות המבצעיות שצה"ל הגיע אליהם בשנתיים האחרונות. יש לנו אחריות כלפיהם גם כחברה. ההתייחסות שלנו אליהם תשפיע גם על דור המפקדים הבא וגם על אלה הנושאים בו היום. אל לנו להיות ארץ אוכלת מפקדיה. אין לנו את הפריבילגיה הזו. הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודובר אמת בלבבו. אמשיך להוביל את צה"ל לאורה של האמת ומתוך אחריות ודבקות במשימה.
Zamir says these are only the first steps and that full accountability requires an external, system-wide review. But the government continues to oppose a formal state commission of inquiry, arguing that the nation is too divided to withstand such a process during an ongoing conflict. Opponents, from former commanders to October 7th survivor groups, insist that anything short of a full independent commission leaves key political decisions untouched and risks bearing the most painful lessons.
And joining us now for more on this and other issues is Yaakov Katz, an American-born Israeli journalist. He's the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post and the author of 4 books on the Israeli military, most recently, While Israel Slept, How Hamas Surprised the Most Powerful Military in the Middle East, which was co-written with Amir Buchbut. Yaakov, thanks for joining us on Security Brief.
Great to be with you, Khalif.
Well, let's get, first of all, to the question posed by your book, a very complicated one that is an issue of debate in Israel. Why did Israel sleep in the days, weeks, months, maybe even years leading to the October 7th attack?
In short, this was not something that was just a tactical error. There were, of course, mistakes that were on the ground. The intelligence misread the information. They didn't interpret it right. They weren't able to imagine, essentially, what Hamas was able to do. They had alarms and alerts, and they saw things that were moving on the ground, but they couldn't put the pieces together. There was the breakdown in defense. There was the trouble with the deployment of the IDF to the border, to those borderline communities on October 7th. All this went wrong, but this was a system failure. There were policies that were put into place. For example, the policy of containment. Over a period of years, we knew that Hamas was our enemy. We knew they had genocidal intentions. We were fighting a war with them every 2 years on average since Israel pulled out of Gaza in the summer of 2005. But we never believed this was possible. We thought you could kick the can down the road. You could buy them off with money. They wanted economic prosperity, when in reality, this was all deception on its way to the attack on October 7th.
But why was this failure to imagine that? I mean, were there not people in the establishment who gave that warning, said Hamas is going to be motivated by its jihadist ideology, suicidal as it may have been, rather than practical considerations of containing control of Gaza?
I think that essentially what happened here is over the years there was an incubation and the cultivation of this policy, this prism, the concepция, as we call it in Hebrew, through which everyone within the system, in the political echelon and in the defense establishment, looked at the Gaza Strip. On the one hand, we had a technological advantage, or we thought. We had Iron Dome to intercept their rockets. When they started to dig tunnels and we saw them pop out in the summer of 2014 during Operation Protective Edge, we built an underground wall and a system to detect when they were digging tunnels. So we thought we were impenetrable. We also had bigger fish to fry. Netanyahu himself writes this in his autobiography that comes out in 2022, just a year before the attack in October, where he says when the people like Naftali Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, when he was back in the cabinet with them in that operation in 2014, wanted to invade Gaza and send troops on the ground, he said no, because he had to stay focused on Iran. He had to stay focused on Hezbollah. And I can't say he's necessarily wrong, but altogether what that did was it created this belief that we can contain Hamas. We know they're there. We know they're an enemy. But between our technological advantage, between our forces that are there, if, God forbid, they were to try something, we will be okay. But in the end, we weren't. And that's the reality.
Right. So that's the strategic failure. There were, as you say, tactical failures. For example, not listening to the warnings made by the female observers
Correct.
on the border. The Army has to be held accountable for that. The Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, says the Army is taking care of its business. But is it? That's one of the questions being asked.
I mean, look, I'll tell you, if I look at the IDF right now, I mean, they failed miserably. And all of these officers who have now been removed from their positions have already stepped down. My heart goes out to them because I think these are people who have dedicated their lives for the defense of the state of Israel. But they failed, and they should be held accountable. That's how it works. And when you fail, that is your responsibility, and you need to be held responsible. So we see that with the head of military intelligence, head of the Southern Command, head of the operations director, and Herzi Halevi, the former chief of staff who stepped down, as well as Ronain Bar, the former head of the Shin Bet. What happened this week, though, with these investigations that now came out, the Sami Turjaman panel, essentially, Herzi Halevi, when he was chief of staff, set up shortly after the war began different teams to investigate different parts of the IDF. When he was replaced earlier this year by General Zamir as the new chief of staff, they together agreed that all of these commissions that had been set up internally by the IDF needed another review. That's the Turjaman panel.
Right.
Comes Israel Katz and says, you know what? Not enough. I want another review of the Turjaman commission that investigated and reviewed already the IDF. I'm sorry, Kalev, it's ridiculous. The military has investigated itself not once, but twice. Now Katz wants a third time. Let me ask you, and we both know the answer. How many times has the political echelon, has the government
we'll get to that in a minute, but
investigated?
there is a basic law put into place after the Yom Kippur War that asserts civilian authority over the military. That is the argument the defense minister is saying, that it's not enough for the army to investigate, the military to investigate itself. It also has to go to the
100%, and I'll be the first to also totally agree. And we're a democracy.
Right.
In a democracy, the military is subordinate to the government. The government gives the orders, the military execute those orders. That's how it should always work, and I hope it continues to work that way. However, how much do we need the military to beat itself up, right? And you know what? No problem. Have a civilian authority or body investigate the military, but also look into the political echelon. That's what's called the State Commission of Inquiry, and that's exactly what this government is trying to avoid having to set up.
Again, the argument they're making is that even though the Gaza war is officially over, Israel is still still in battle on multiple fronts.
You know, Kalev, during the war, Prime Minister Netanyahu said a number of times, first of all, he refused to take responsibility. He never apologized for the failures of October 7th, as opposed to the other people, the heads of the IDF, the heads of the Shin Bet, and other officials within the security establishment. I put that aside for a moment. He is a politician.
Right.
The reason that there wasn't a commission of inquiry, he said, is because we're still fighting. Already over a month ago, the 20 living hostages came back. The war de-escalated from the high-intensity stage to the stage we're at now, which is kind of this status quo, waiting to see what's going to happen, and if the Trump plan will move to what's called the second stage, phase 2. We don't know if it will. Hopefully it will. But now there is a perfect opportunity to set this up. What does the government, though, go ahead and do? It says, we're not doing a state commission of inquiry. We're not going to do what the Israeli law allows, what has been done for decades, what happened after the Yom Kippur War when we had the Agranat Commission. That we're not going to do. What he did is he set up 10 ministers, put them on a panel, said, you guys go take 45 days and think about what is the mandate of any commission that we as a government are going to create. Let me ask you a question, Kalev. You've been in this business for a long time. Does it sound normal that somebody who's being investigated is going to choose who is going to investigate them? I mean, I'm going to be a suspect in a crime. I'll go to the police station and I'll say, you know what, line up, let me do auditions for whoever's going to question me. It doesn't work that way. We need an independent commission and body that can look at the entire system. This is something that goes deep. And I understand why the government wants to avoid it, because they know what will potentially be discovered.
Well, there will be elections anyway in the coming year that probably will determine eventually whether there'll be such a commission or not. Let's talk about, you mentioned phase 2 of the Gaza plan. Let's move on to from what was to where we are now. As you mentioned before, now there are now only 2 deceased hostages left in Gaza. It does appear this is the time to move to phase 2. How do you see that developing? What do you think is most likely now going to happen?
I wish I could say I'm optimistic. I mean, you know, Israel is in control now of about 57% of the Gaza Strip. Hamas in charge of about 43%. So let's say 53 and 47, sorry. So it's about 50-50. We have the yellow line. We have that perimeter. They have their area. Hamas has reasserted its control. They are the sovereign ruler now in that half of Gaza that they control. They're out back on the streets. They're armed. They're wearing their masks, their green headbands. They're still there. We have Hamas operatives and terrorists who are also in the part that Israel is controlling. How does the disarmament work in this case? Do we really think that they're going to willingly give up their weapons? Do we think that this so-called ISF, International Stabilization Force, which is one of the points of the Trump 20-point plan, is supposed to be assembled from countries all over the world, from Egypt and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and maybe Turkey and Qatar? They're going to come in and disarm Hamas? We know that's not going to happen. Also, disarmament. Does that not include the tunnels? And if it includes the tunnels and there's about 150, 200 miles left, who's going to do that? This is a meticulous, very complicated task. Not to mention, where's the governing entity that's supposed to rule over Gaza that does not include Hamas? My point is, there are huge obstacles in the way, huge challenges. I think there's a lot of wishful thinking on the part of the Americans, and this is being led, we have to say, by the Trump administration. For now, Israel's playing ball, but as long as this is the situation and Hamas does not willingly give up its weapons, and let's be honest, nobody's going to come in and take it away from them and risk a clash with Hamas, it's going to be left up to us. And that will mean, potentially at some point in the future, a re-engagement and a renewal of the high-intensity stage of this conflict.
Right, but that will be a very different Gaza, and Israel will be operating the IDF on a very difficult battlefield because, as you said, there is talk of introducing this ISF foreign forces, at least into parts of Gaza. The U.S. now has a role, and it seems like, in many ways, a decision-making role with Gaza from their new command center. Is the IDF going to be able to function within effectively within these new parameters?
Look at what's happening in the north, because it's a good way to reflect on the south. In the north, we've had this UNIFIL force, right? The UN peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon for the last couple of decades. It has been it's hindered the IDF's ability to operate. It undermines operational freedom because you might see a Hezbollah guy and then see UN Spanish or Italian, French peacekeeping forces that are nearby. It makes it more difficult. Their mandate has not been renewed. They are going to phase out. The army is happy about that. Now, look at Gaza. If we now have this ISF there and Hamas rebuilds tunnels, hides its arms inside facilities right next to where these international soldiers and forces are based, will the Israeli army be able to operate, or will its hands once again be tied? I'm not sure that Israel is ecstatic about the possibility of these forces, and definitely not excited about the option that you're going to have Turkish and Qatari forces on the ground.
Well, forces, my understanding is
not going to happen. But whatever role they will play is a role that Israel does not want to see. This is the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas being a outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood. We don't want to see that axis return and start to take hold inside the Gaza Strip.
All right. Well, since you mentioned the North, let's discuss it, because very big news out of Beirut of today, of course, the targeted killing of the really military commander, or the number 2, basically, of Hezbollah. You paint the scenario where it seems it's almost inevitable for another round of Israel against Hamas. Is that the same scenario developing in the north?
Look, we're talking the week of the 1-year anniversary to the ceasefire that we struck with the American mediation back a year ago in November of 2024 between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a shadow of its former self. However, if we look at what's happened over the last year, Israel has been doing what I like to call mowing the lawn. It's been operating, taking out trucks of weapons, taking out arms that it's discovered, killed over 300 Hezbollah operatives and terrorists over the last year. What happened this week with the elimination in the Dakhia neighborhood, the Hezbollah stronghold of Beirut, when it took out the senior Hezbollah military commander, the number 2 in the organization, is definitely an escalation, but it's meant to do 2 things. One, sow more chaos and confusion within Hezbollah, make their ability to launch attacks or to rebuild even more difficult, but also, and no less important, send a message to the Lebanese government, the official government: you got to collect the weapons and disarm Hezbollah. That was supposed to happen. A year has passed and nothing has happened.
It's a very parallel, a similar situation in Gaza.
Exactly.
Who is going to actually do the dirty work of getting Hezbollah and Hamas to lay down their arms.
And unfortunately, Kalev,
Right.
when we look at the reality, no one's willing to do it. And it falls on Israel. And Israel will have to make a tough decision, definitely when it comes to Gaza, and of course also with Lebanon. Israel doesn't want to renew the war there. But if we don't stop Hezbollah and we don't keep up this policy of preemption, which is good now, but will we be able to keep it up long term? I'm not sure. They will rebuild. The Iranians want them to rebuild. They're keeping that relationship very close. The Hezbollah has a desire to rebuild its forces, definitely in the north, but also they want to start to move below the Litani River into southern Lebanon. And Israel's going to have to decide which way it goes. And we can't forget, though, that in Lebanon, the reality is even more complex because you have a government that is backed by the French, backed by the United States. Unfortunately, though, it was only a few months ago that we were hearing about prospects of maybe some sort of normalization one day with Lebanon. That doesn't seem to be anywhere in the cards at the moment.
It certainly doesn't. And again, you raised the Iranians, their role in it. They're helping Hezbollah to rearm. They themselves are reportedly rebuilding their nuclear facilities. Again, is what we experienced in June just round one of perhaps another shooting war with Iran?
From what I hear from officials, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Right? Iran, the axis was on decline and in decline, and that was the re-engineering that Israel has created here. And by the way, with everything we said before about the Netanyahu government, they deserve the credit for this re-engineering in the Middle East over the last 2 years. But with that said, it has to be maintained. And Iran is rebuilding its nuclear facilities. It's trying to rearm its ballistic missiles many of them were fired at Israel, over 500, and Israel also was able to destroy many of them, and their missile launchers, and air defense systems. They're working with China, they're working with Russia, they're doing some of it domestic. If we allowed them to keep doing this, imagine that missile threat. Look at what just about 500 missiles fired at Israel, 10% land here, about 50, kill about 30 people, cause extensive damage. That was with about 2,500 missiles that they had, about 400 missile launchers. Now imagine that number is double, or God forbid, triple. What firepower they would have and what that could potentially do to the state of Israel in the next round. This will have to be maintained somehow. So either we have two options. Either there's a new nuclear deal and there's a new accord with Iran brokered by the United States, or we're going to have to see more action against Iran inside Iran itself.
Briefly, so you've written a lot about Israel's technological advancements, the IDF's advancements on the battlefield. Is Israel going to be able to maintain that edge in the coming years?
It's becoming all the more complicated. It's becoming complicated because, number one, we saw just last week, MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi, goes to the White House and walks away with the promise that they'll be able to get the F-35. Other countries want the F-35, fifth-generation stealth fighter jet that only Israel flies at the moment in the Middle East. That will shake the balance of power here. And not to mention the fact that we've seen over the last 2 years in Gaza how complicated it is when you're fighting an enemy embedded in civilian infrastructure with a tunnel network. It's tough to get that decisive victory, even with the amazing technology that we have. So Israel will have to keep up that race to keep that technological edge. But at the same time, it can't neglect the old skills that are still required for these types of battles that we still face.
All right, Yaakov Katz, I know your work is read by the policymakers in Israel, and hopefully your latest book, While Israel Slept, is going to be read and digested for them so that Israel will awaken from that slumber that led to the October 7th attack. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. And now a final word. Last week saw the passing of IDF Major General Eli Zaira at age 97. Zaira is most famous or infamous for his role as commander of military intelligence in the period leading up to the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when the Egyptian and Syrian armies caught Israel completely by surprise. The post-war Agranat Commission laid much of the blame for that failure on Zaira, finding him negligent to the point of disregarding strong evidence that such an attack was coming. And he was forced to resign from the IDF in disgrace. Zaira's role in the Yom Kippur War debacle was a warning sign for future Israeli military and governmental leaders. He ignored clear warnings about Egyptian and Syrian intentions because he had become too fixated on what was called the concept, an intelligence assessment that those countries would not dare attack Israel again after suffering such devastating losses in the 1967 Six-Day War. Yet despite that mishap, Israeli security and policymakers would repeat that same error in the period leading up to the October 7th attack by buying into another concept, believing that Hamas had too much vested interest in maintaining the status quo in Gaza rather than risk losing it all in a near-suicidal cross-border raid. It was the same complacency and arrogance that dooms the era from imagining a worst-case scenario and planning for all contingencies, a costly lesson that hopefully won't have to be learned firsthand again by future Israeli generations. But there's another aspect of the Yom Kippur War, particularly its aftermath, that contains within it another cautionary tale relevant to our present situation. The Agranat Commission that ended Zair's military career, along with that of then Chief of Staff Dado Elazar and other senior commanders, failed to hold the political echelon accountable, clearing them of direct responsibility for failing to anticipate the war's outbreak. But the public refused to accept that conclusion, seeing it as a whitewash of the government, leading to mass protests, which eventually forced Prime Minister Golda Meir and Defense Minister Moshe Dayan to resign. Now the current Israeli government is opposing having an official state commission investigate the outbreak of the October 7th war, preferring probes that are directly overseen by members of the same cabinet who were in place before and during those dark days. However, if they believe this will enable them to ultimately avoid responsibility for those events, history tells us otherwise. Eli Zair died last week, a relatively forgotten figure in Israel. It is the formidable legacies of Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan that today must reckon with the setbacks of the Yom Kippur War. Because in a democracy, just as authority over military policy must remain in the hands of the civilian leadership, so must also be the responsibility for its failures. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. The remains of Dror Or, one of the hostages abducted from Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th, have been returned to Israel. Authorities identified his body this morning, bringing a difficult and long-awaited closure to his family after more than 2 years. That leaves just 2 more deceased hostages still in Israel, Israeli Ran Gvili and Thai national Suthasik Rinthalik. Our correspondent India Naftali has more.
The remains of 48-year-old Dror Or were returned to Israel on Tuesday night and formally identified Wednesday morning, ending more than 2 years of uncertainty for his family. Or was murdered on October 7th and his body taken hostage from Kibbutz Be'eri, along with 2 of his children who were taken alive, 17-year-old Noam and 13-year-old Alma. His wife Yonat was also killed that morning, though her body was not abducted. On October 7th, the family tried to escape after terrorists set their home on fire. Dror and his wife sent their children out a window first, hoping to increase their chances of survival. A neighbor witnessed terrorists abduct the children. Their eldest son, Yahli, was away in northern Israel doing his national service and survived. Dror Or's abducted children, Noam and Alma, were freed in November 2023 as part of a temporary ceasefire. In May 2024, a special interagency committee, including the Health Ministry, intelligence officials, police, the Religious Services Ministry, and the Chief Rabbinate, formally determined that Dror Or had been murdered on October 7th. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum said at the time that the government must do everything to ensure that the body of Dror Or and all murdered hostages receive proper burials in Israel. Dror Or was born in Kibbutz Re'im and later moved to Tel Aviv to study culinary arts. He eventually returned to Kibbutz Be'eri with his wife, where he became a chef and cheesemaker at the award-winning Be'eri Dairy. He loved travel, basketball, and yoga, practicing for 20 years and becoming a certified instructor. His family described him as calm, kind, and deeply grounded. The family of Dror Or has been through unimaginable suffering. The return of his body will allow them to begin the process of closure. This moment now makes Israel closer than ever to bringing all of its fallen hostages home for burial.
At ILTV, we're not just reporting the news, we're on a mission. Every story we tell stands for truth, for Zionism, and for Israel. When you subscribe, you're not just buying an app, you're becoming a partner in strengthening Israel's voice around the world. ILTV is factual, direct, and unapologetically pro-Israel, and we need you with us. Scan the QR code on your screen right now to subscribe and stand with Israel, because this isn't just news, it's a mission.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground, where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English. Back to ILTV on the Hour. We're bringing you the biggest headlines of Israel and the region. I'm Devo Klein, and this is your roundup of all of the latest developments coming out of Israel. We have initial reports of airstrikes in two different locations. The first being southern Lebanon. The IDF is striking Hezbollah positions there. And the second in Jenin in northern Samaria. We await more information regarding the Lebanon strikes, but the Jenin strikes come as the IDF and Israel Border Police are engaged in another day of counterterrorism operations. Just in the past night, IDF troops detained multiple suspects while searching for weapons in the Tubas area in northern Samaria. Raids were conducted in areas where intelligence suggests local terror groups attempted to establish presence. The operation details are now revealed. The raids begin with an airstrike directed by ground troops to isolate the area before allowing foot soldiers to enter alongside border police officers. The ground forces conduct searches and raids before detaining suspects and beginning interrogation. According to preliminary reports, the IDF in Shin Bet arrested or questioned 60 people. And in an interesting twist, among those detained and later released was Samir Basharat, the mayor of prominent Arab town Tamun. And moving to Gaza, the IDF this morning confirmed the elimination of 3 terror operatives in 2 different incidents. In both instances, armed terrorists crossed the yellow line into the IDF-controlled area for the ceasefire, thus violating the agreement and actively threatening troops on the ground. In the south of the Strip, Kfir Brigade soldiers eliminated a Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist by ordering airstrikes to target the gunman. A short time later, surveillance teams identified another terrorist approaching troops in southern Gaza. Soldiers of the Gaza's Division Southern Brigade opened fire and eliminated him. And in the north, the Air Force struck and killed a Hamas operative who the IDF says was preparing an imminent sniper attack against Israeli troops, publishing the video of the strike. These recurring incidents reflect the current situation in Rafah, as dozens of Hamas terrorists are still trapped underground, hiding in a tunnel on the IDF-held side of the Yellow Line. But for the first time in weeks, Israeli media reported a solution in a proposal sent through mediators. Israel has offered the terrorists to surrender, disarm, and move to Israeli prisons, later to be transferred to the Hamas-controlled Gaza. But so far, the gunmen are refusing, and at this point it's unclear whether the message is even making it to these trapped terrorists. And speaking of Hamas, in a disturbing development, Israel's defense establishment is warning that Hamas is quietly rebuilding its rule in the Gaza Strip, and faster than many in the cabinet realize. Senior defense officials told ministers that 13 of Gaza's 25 municipalities are back to full activity, once again run by Hamas. According to reports, Hamas police are redeployed at checkpoints, infrastructure is being repaired, and security sources say the organization has re-established its control in the minds of Gazans. Reports also confirm that Hamas has resumed checkpoint operations and is back to collecting taxes from truck drivers, just as it did before the war. This rapid rebuilding is igniting new tensions between Jerusalem and Washington. The Trump administration is pushing ahead with the next phase of its 20-point plan for the Gaza's day after, even as Israel warns that Hamas remains armed, entrenched, and deeply involved in local decision-making. With the U.S. struggling to assemble a multinational stabilization force, Washington is turning to interim solutions that Israel strongly rejects. Defense officials say the conclusion is clear. If the United States does not move to dismantle Hamas, Israel will have to do it instead. And in an exciting story, an exciting development, 8 Israeli restaurants have been ranked among the very best in the world. The ranking comes from the prestigious La Liste, one of the most respected global rankings, which included Israeli cuisine in their top 1,000 restaurants from around the world. Now, this is a major milestone for the Israeli food scene and a massive international win, with 7 of the restaurants making the list from Tel Aviv and 1 being in Jerusalem. This is a massive show not just of resilience, but resilience during wartime, as Israel continues to impress the world. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Don't forget to scan the QR code on your screen for more updates. I'm Deborah Klein, and thanks so much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Caleb Ben David. And coming up in today's newscast, the body returned yesterday from Gaza, ID'd as October 7th victim Dror Or, leaving just 2 more deceased hostages. Amid continuing clashes in Gaza, the U.S. holds talks to get phase 2 of the Trump plan underway. Argentina's President Milei says his country's embassy will move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in the spring. The remains of Dror Or, one of the hostages abducted from Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th, have been returned to Israel. Authorities identified his body this morning, bringing a difficult and long-awaited closure to his family after more than 2 years. That leaves just 2 more deceased hostages still in Israel, Israeli Ran Gvili and Thai national Suthasik Rinthalik. Our correspondent India Naftali has more.
The remains of 48-year-old Dror Or were returned to Israel on Tuesday night and formally identified Wednesday morning, ending more than 2 years of uncertainty for his family. Or was murdered on October 7th and his body taken hostage from Kibbutz Be'eri, along with 2 of his children who were taken alive, 17-year-old Noam and 13-year-old Alma. His wife Yonat was also killed that morning, though her body was not abducted. On October 7th, the family tried to escape after terrorists set their home on fire. Dror and his wife sent their children out a window first, hoping to increase their chances of survival. A neighbor witnessed terrorists abduct the children. Their eldest son, Yahli, was away in northern Israel doing his national service and survived. Dror Or's abducted children, Noam and Alma, were freed in November 2023 as part of a temporary ceasefire. In May 2024, a special interagency committee, including the Health Ministry, intelligence officials, police, the Religious Services Ministry, and the Chief Rabbinate, formally determined that Dror Or had been murdered on October 7th. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum said at the time that the government must do everything to ensure that the body of Dror Or and all murdered hostages receive proper burials in Israel. Dror Or was born in Kibbutz Re'im and later moved to Tel Aviv to study culinary arts. He eventually returned to Kibbutz Be'eri with his wife, where he became a chef and cheesemaker at the award-winning Be'eri Dairy. He loved travel, basketball, and yoga, practicing for 20 years and becoming a certified instructor. His family described him as calm, kind, and deeply grounded. The family of Dror Or has been through unimaginable suffering. The return of his body will allow them to begin the process of closure. This moment now makes Israel closer than ever to bringing all of its fallen hostages home for burial.
Clashes continue in Gaza, with the IDF today killing 6 terrorists who emerged from the tunnels beneath Rafah, after yesterday killing 5 others. But with the remains of all but 2 hostages now back in Israel, attention is turning to phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Talks are reportedly underway in Cairo, with mediators searching for ways to implement the next phase of the Trump plan. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Delegations from Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, which along with the United States make up the mediators of the current ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, are reportedly meeting in Cairo to discuss the second phase of the deal. Egyptian media says Egyptian and Turkish intelligence chiefs met the Qatari prime minister to address overcoming obstacles and limiting violations to ensure the ceasefire holds. The mediators discussed working with the U.S. to ensure the successful implementation of the second phase of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. The Gaza deal came into effect on October 10th after 2 years of war, sparked by the Hamas-led mass terror onslaught of October 7th, 2023. Amid the ceasefire, there are ongoing local clashes. The IDF said it killed 5 gunmen in eastern Rafah, an IDF-held sector of southern Gaza, where dozens of Hamas operatives are still trapped in a network of underground tunnels. Troops of the Nachal Brigade conducting scans in the area spotted the 5 armed operatives and eliminated them. 1 week ago, IDF troops shot dead 4 operatives who surfaced from a tunnel in the same area. Over the weekend, an additional 17 gunmen emerged from tunnel routes. Most were killed, others captured. In a separate incident, the IDF said troops shot dead a terror operative who crossed the yellow line, marking the army's withdrawal in the northern Gaza Strip. The IDF has vowed to kill or capture all remaining operatives on the Israeli side of the yellow line in accordance with the October ceasefire agreement.
Well, the red carpet treatment was given last week in the White House to Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But reports are now emerging that U.S. President Donald Trump was left disappointed and angry after what sources describe as a tense exchange with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman over the issue of normalization with Israel. More in this report. The meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the White House last week seemed to be mostly smiles and agreement, at least publicly. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. Details now being reported by Axios and Israel's Channel 12, citing senior U.S. officials, say in private the two clashed over the issue of Saudi ties with Israel. According to the report, it was Trump who brought up the subject, pressing the Crown Prince to advance immediately toward normalization. Bin Salman reportedly pushed back, saying he's not opposed to the idea in principle, but after the war in Gaza, anti-Israel sentiment in Saudi Arabia makes any such move impossible at this time. Officials say the exchange remained polite, but Trump was clearly irritated by the response, with one source saying he left the meeting both disappointed and angry. The officials stress, however, that bin Salman did not say never. He left the door open to future normalization, but repeated that progress towards a two-state solution remains a central requirement, a position he stated publicly during his visit to Washington. The Saudi embassy declined to comment on the report. The White House issued only a short statement saying, President Trump calls on all Middle Eastern countries to join the Abraham Accords. This latest report underscores the ongoing gap between Washington's push for a breakthrough now and Riyadh's insistence on conditions it says cannot be met at this moment. And joining us now for more is Reserves Major General Yaakov Amidror. He's the former head of Israel's National Security Council. He's now with the Ginza Strategic Center. General Amidror, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we should be, of course, immensely grateful. Another hostage returned. Almost all the hostages are now back. In theory, that should be now leading Gaza from phase 1 of the agreement into phase 2. We know on paper what that's supposed to look like, but based on what is actually happening in Gaza and in the region, how do you think it's going to develop in the next few weeks?
I think that the Americans will continue their efforts to organize forces that will come into Gaza to do what is needed according to the plan to disarm Hamas and to begin the rebuilding of Gaza. First of all, to understand what is the situation and then to make some preparations and plans. I think that they are too optimistic. I don't see the countries which will be ready to send their forces to fight Hamas. I don't see Hamas ready to disarm itself. It is true that if you would ask the same question a few months ago, I probably, my answer was very pessimistic about the ability of the Americans to convince Hamas to release the hostages, and it happened. So we have to be very careful. As far as we can understand the situation today, the Americans didn't succeed to move Hamas towards any agreement about disarming them. And without such an agreement, I don't know who will do the job.
Well, in the meantime, there has been a situation that's developed with one half of the Gaza Strip in Israel in the IDF's hands, another in a resurgent Hamas. We see Hamas reasserting itself in that area of Gaza. Is that a status quo that Israel and the IDF can live with, can maintain?
Israel can maintain it if no hostages in the hands of Hamas. The IDF is a buffer between Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Gaza envelope population. From our point of view, we can continue for a long time. There is no any pressure on Israel in this situation. We are in a good position to defend ourselves, to defend the people around Gaza. Hamas is separated from Egypt. They cannot smuggle in a weapon system. They cannot continue to produce inside Gaza. They lost their ability to produce in Gaza. Yes, they can recruit more members to the organization. They can train them. They can prepare more explosives and traps for the IDF in the future. Hamas will be stronger, but not in a level which will stop the IDF if the IDF decide to go and to take control of this area where Hamas is now. So from that point of view, this situation, Israel is not any under pressure. But I think that the Americans are under pressure because the more time Hamas is holding the area, less are the chances to convince the organization to be disarmed. And the suffering of the people in Gaza is enormous. I mean, to live in these circumstances under the control of this organization, it's a nightmare. And I think that the Americans understand it, the Arab countries understand it. And I will not be surprised if the end of the day, the Americans and others, some on the table, some under the table, will tell us, you know what, do the job and destroy Hamas. And we will have to resume the war in Gaza.
Resume the war in Gaza, and there is a similar situation seems to be developing on the northern front with Lebanon. Again, the question is, who is going to disarm Hezbollah according to the terms of that agreement? So are we basically looking at a return to potentially a multi-front war in the either near or certainly coming future?
The situation in the north is a different situation because there is a government, there is an address of responsibility inside the Lebanon, unlike Gaza, in which Hamas is the top organization. It is the body which is governing the Gaza Strip. So in Lebanon, the situation is a different one. But yes, it might come at the end to a situation in which the Americans and maybe even the Lebanese government under the table will tell us, guys, we don't know how to do it. We cannot do it. Do whatever you can, and we will have to take care for Hezbollah. It's a different kind of a war. Now there is no any threat from land forces towards our settlements in the north. It will be probably almost totally Air Force operation against facilities and capabilities of Hezbollah. It is not two front. It is one front, probably totally Air Force operation, and the other one will be with huge land forces, ground forces going into Gaza. And remember that unlike what happened in Lebanon 2 years ago, year and a half ago, today Syria is a country which is hostile to Hezbollah in Lebanon.
All right, Yaakov Amidror, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
In Buenos Aires, the Argentine president, Javier Milei, has told Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar that Argentina will open its new embassy in Jerusalem this spring. Argentina will thus become the 8th nation to move embassies to the Israeli capital. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Foreign Minister Sarr's office says the announcement by President Milei that the embassy will be moved came during a meeting between the two leaders focused on deepening bilateral ties and expanding economic cooperation. Sarr also urged Milei to formally designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. Milei, a strong pro-Israel leader, reportedly wore a kippah during the meeting as Sarr recited a blessing congratulating him on his recent parliamentary election victory. According to Sarr's office, the Argentine president also showed the minister a mezuzah affixed to the entrance of his office. The Argentinian president first pledged to move the embassy during a speech in the Knesset 5 months ago.
Y tengo el orgullo de anunciar ante ustedes que en 2026 haremos efectiva la mudanza de nuestra embajada a la ciudad de Jerusalén Occidental como lo prometimos.
Sarr thanked the Argentinian leader for his friendship and support throughout the war.
The relationship between Israel and Argentina is not only special, it is extraordinary. Argentina had stood firmly by Israel through our darkest hours during the last 2 years. This will not be forgotten. Argentina has been and continues to be a trusted partner on the right side of history. We believe in Argentina under the leadership of President Milei. We believe in its bright future. President Milei is repaving Argentina's path to greatness.
Argentina will become the 8th country to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, following Fiji, the United States, Guatemala, Honduras, Kosovo, Papua New Guinea, and Paraguay.
We are about to have the president on April or on May opening the new embassy in Jerusalem, D.C., David's capital.
The IDF, Shin Bet, and Israel Border Police began operating early this morning as part of a broad counter-terror operation in the area of northern Samaria. Earlier, the army announced that it had killed a Palestinian terrorist who murdered an Israeli guard last year. The IDF says Sultan Al-Khani, who fled after killing Gidon Perry in August 2024, was slain in an exchange of fire with a commando unit south of Jenin. Al-Khani fatally wounded security guard Perry, 38, at the Bar-On Industrial Park near Kedumim by attacking him with a hammer before snatching his handgun and fleeing the scene. The operation came hours after another Palestinian assailant, who killed 2 soldiers last year and had been on the run ever since, was killed by Israeli forces in Nablus. Leket Israel is the largest food rescue operation in Israel today. We have the honor of having Leket Israel founder Joseph Gittler and Chen Herzog, the chief economist at BDO, here in our studios to explain what food rescue is and how it can help reduce food waste in Israel. Let's take a look.
A new decade summary report from Leket Israel and BDO shows both the dramatic progress of the last 10 years and the enormous challenges that remain. A decade ago, Israel had no national policy on food waste. Today, after years of pressure from Leket Israel and cooperation with the health and environment ministries, Israel finally has its first national plan to reduce food loss. Still, the cost is staggering: 211 billion shekels in wasted food over 10 years, while 1.5 million Israelis face food insecurity. Joining me now are Joseph Gittler, founder of Leket Israel, and Chen Herzog, chief economist at BDO. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you.
Hi. So, Joseph, let me start with you. Take us back 10 years. There was no policy, no national strategy. Where were we then, and what progress has been made ever since?
So the good news is we now have, as you mentioned, this national policy. There's much more awareness among the population. There's more awareness and interest from the government and different government bodies. And so we're moving in the right direction. The problem is that while Israelis are wasting less, this latest report talks about less waste, going from 300 kilos a year per person to 260 kilos. Our population has grown dramatically since we put out the first report, so the amount of food waste is even greater than it was 10 years ago. Leket's grown over the last 10 years, but we're not close to solving this issue. We need a bigger push, and we need a lot more awareness from the population. I would say also this has to bother people. And if it doesn't really bother people, and it's a shame because it's money in your pocket. When people waste food, sometimes it's hard to envision the environmental costs. It's hard to see down that stream of what it does when food goes to waste. So we need to talk to people about their pockets. And especially, we even see waste among those who can't afford it, which is an incredible thing to see.
And Chen, even with the progress, the country lost 26 billion shekels in food just last year. What does that say about where we stand today?
So we have to understand really the problem or the magnitude of food waste. 39% of the food consumed and produced in Israel is lost, it's thrown away. And this causes economic problem, environmental problem, food security and health problem. So let's start from the economic problem. At the end of the day, food loss really means that we as civilians pay more. And this number of 211 billion shekels over the last decade means that every household in Israel, every family, lost 70,000 shekels in the last decade. And it all translates to standard of living. If we throw the food at home, of course it costs us money. But not only the food that we throw at home is costly, because even when food is lost throughout the entire value chain, in the agriculture, in the industry, in the retail shops, it all translates to higher cost of living. And I think we saw this impact, this economic impact, very clearly in the past 2 years during the wartime, because wartime caused more food loss. We couldn't reach many of the fields. There were not enough workers, agricultural workers, to pick up the food, which resulted in costs increasing. So we had more food waste, more expensive fruits and vegetables. And those people with food insecurity, their situation also only worsened. So the economic equation is very simple. Rather than throwing this food away, we should rescue it and feed the needy, and it's a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, you, Joseph, have worked with ministries, you pushed for legislation, and helped shape the new national plan. What still needs to be done to turn this momentum into real large-scale change? So
I don't want to get into trouble with the viewers, but we need to make... I'm going to give an example of a change that we need. You know, I love where I live. I love that garbage is picked up 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. We're a little generous in this country when it comes to some of the things that we do. So, for example, you have countries around the world where to open your garbage can, you need to swipe your credit card, okay? And it's weighed. Now, the most expensive and heaviest things we throw away is actually wasted food. And so we need to change the way we look at garbage. We need to change the way we look at food waste. Food, even with everyone's protest about the cost of living in this country and the cost of food, we don't see much change. People take great pride, which I can understand. Everyone wants to be generous. Everyone wants their tables to be full. And of course, we can't take any chances with not having enough food to feed our population. But like most countries, we're producing way more than we need. And so we need to change things around a little bit in our attitudes towards food and towards waste. And maybe when it becomes a little more expensive, as an example, to waste food, then people will start to take it more seriously.
I understand. It's a very interesting thought. Now, the report links food loss directly to rising produce prices. So I'll ask you, Chen, especially since the war, why is reducing food waste now an economic priority and not just a social one?
So what the report illustrates that food rescue is not only philanthropic work, it's also economics. Because what do? We take food that we invested a lot of money, a lot of efforts to produce it, to grow it, and then we take all this value and throw it away. So what actually food rescue does is it takes all this lost value and returns it back to the needy. And the economic equation is that to rescue 1 kilogram of food costs about 1 shekel. But the economic benefit of this food is 3.6 shekels. So we take 1 shekel and we convert it or we enlarge it by 3.6 times.
Joseph, let's close with the bigger picture. What are the real benefits of food rescue for Israel, economically, socially, environmentally? Chen just mentioned some. And after a decade of work, what message do you both want Israelis and policymakers to hear right now?
So what I would like these policymakers and the public to hear is something positive. We see the change. We see the interest. People want to waste less. But we'd like to see the supermarket chains, as an example, offering what we call ugly fruits and vegetables at a discount. The kind of fruits and vegetables we never see, but if they were there and were made more affordable, then people would buy them. As large as Leket has become, we will never be big enough to take care of the need. This is only something the public, with us, and the government can do together.
Well, Joseph and Chen of Leket Israel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want to learn more about Leket Israel, just scan the QR code on your screens now. And let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight. Temperatures reaching lows of 14 degrees Celsius or 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel. And you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Caleb Ben David. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.
Good evening and welcome to Insider. I'm Alec Pollard. Thanks for joining. Over a month since the ceasefire in Gaza went into effect, but low-scale warfare continues in the Strip. Inside the yellow line under Israeli control. In the other half of Gaza, outside Israeli influence, Hamas remains largely in charge and still armed. Meanwhile, the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, tasked with delivering aid and diverting it away from Hamas, is disbanding, handing operations over to the new Civil Military Coordination Center. Can it and other international organizations be trusted? Can international forces from countries like Azerbaijan and Indonesia counter Hamas's influence? What's the future of Gaza? To break it down, I'm joined by Olga Deutsch, Vice President of NGO Monitor, with us here in studio, and Dr. Eric Mandel, the founder and director at MEPIN, the Middle East Political and Information Network, joining us from Florida. Thank you, both of you, very much for being here with us. I'm going to start with you, Eric, with the situation in Gaza. The fighting is still ongoing over there, as we see in some parts of the Strip, and it seems like Hamas will remain armed in Gaza unless Israel is the one to disarm them. Can any of these international forces that are being talked about actually prevent Hamas from being in control and armed in Gaza?
I think it is a fantasy to believe that anyone other than the IDF is going to be able or willing to disarm Hamas. And Hamas knows that. The international force, they've made it clear that they are not going to disarm and demilitarize. We'll break it down. There's disarming, that means taking away the weapons. Hamas right from the beginning said, no, we're going to be able to keep defensive weapons, which meant that they were going to break it immediately. And then there's demilitarization, which means going into the tunnel network. And the majority of the tunnels, a little unbeknownst to most people, are still intact, even in the western part of Gaza, the 47% that are there. The countries do not want to be, the Arab countries and Muslim countries do not want to be perceived as doing Israel's work. And I don't blame them, not for that, but I don't blame them for worrying that Hamas, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, which happily President Trump halfway has gone to hopefully claim is a foreign terrorist organization. They don't want their citizens to die at the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood and then become targets for international terrorism. And so what's going to happen? There's two parallel situations. One, Israel in the north seemingly is being allowed to do what it needs to do to Hezbollah, with American approval, but I don't see that American approval going to allow Israel to do what it really needs in Gaza. And so we're in a very difficult situation. Thereafter tonight, there will be only two remaining hostage remains that are still there. And so right now, I think Gaza is, I wouldn't even say a mixed bag. It's a place where Hamas, by strategy, giving up the live hostages, knew it was going to create a situation that it would not only be the dominant force, but really the overwhelming force in Gaza. And they are going to look, they play the long game, look for another day, and will have a slow attrition war against Israel in the eastern part of Gaza.
Right. Olga, NGO Monitor, for years you have tracked how NGOs abuse, misuse aid that's given to the Palestinians and just provide outright cover for terrorist organizations. Is there any organization that could or will operate in Gaza that you trust?
Well, it's a question we get all the time, and it's sadly not an easy one to answer. There is no one way to whitelist organizations, because I don't think anyone can or should take responsibility for another organization. They can say and claim one thing today and a completely different thing tomorrow. What is needed and is actually of a historical importance right now, as we discuss the day after in Gaza, and let us just frame it. Right now, everyone is talking that the reconstruction of Gaza will cost around $70 billion, right? Now, anywhere until now, humanitarian aid and development aid, anywhere between 10% and 1/4 of it actually went as non-physical aid. Most of us will think that it's usually diapers and baby formula and medicine or tents or concrete, right? And we know that even those were stolen, appropriated, and used to build Hamas police state in Gaza. But anywhere between 10% and 1/4 actually goes into political advocacy projects. Now, when you add that into the mix, then you actually get Palestinian terror proxy organizations going after us, after our soldiers around the world, ICC, ICJ, lawsuits trying to prevent us from getting U.S. military aid through F-35 programs and so on. So the only way to condition this aid, to make sure that the reality in Gaza is different than it was before, is to completely revamp. How do we control? How do we vet? Who are our partners? Who do we send in? How do we monitor the organization's work throughout the period? And if anyone is caught working with Hamas or any other group, because Hamas is not the only one, let's not forget the Islamic Jihad and PFLP are still fully operating terror organizations.
Islamic Jihad were involved now in the release of one of the last Israeli remains in Gaza.
And the three of them took part on October the 7th. The three of them were shooting rockets after October the 7th, and all three held hostages. Now, part of this problematic is also the UN and all the UN structures, including UNRWA. UNRWA is the most symbolic one, but it's not the only one. It's one of 34 approximately agencies operating there. So it begs the question, and I think US is the only entity right now, the only player that can put a foot down and say, these are going to be the red lines. Anything beyond these red lines will just not be acceptable. If we talk about these conditions, UN is still to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization, right? I mean, it's a basic thing to think about.
Right, so there's some crucial things you brought up there, the United States involvement, and there's pressures in the Republican Party right now not to get over-involved in some of these issues, and also UNRWA, which we're going to get into both those subjects. But first, regarding the international organizations, we're going to come back to you, Eric. The Gaza Humanitarian Fund, they're ending their operations in Gaza. They delivered millions and millions of meals to Gazans and did their best to keep it out of the hands of Hamas. How would you assess how well or not well were their activities, how successful were their activities in Gaza, and also this new organization that's going to be taking over some of their activities, the Civil Military Coordination Center, that's commanded by Admiral Charles Bradford Cooper. It's going to be based, part of it, in Kiryat Gat, I believe, in Israel. There's going to be a counterpart with the Egyptians. So Gaza Humanitarian Fund, how did they do? And this new organization, can they do better?
So I have firsthand experience just a couple of months ago with the Gaza Humanitarian Fund and also some of the other agencies. I was there part of a journalist delegation that went into Gaza when they were claiming that there was starvation and not enough food, the quantity of food. And what I saw was acres and acres and acres and acres of food, including fresh fruit and vegetables. And I saw many UN trucks lined up. Gaza Humanitarian Fund was doing excellent work, but they became totally disparaged. And, you know, of course, any of these organizations are going to be challenged because Hamas wanted to control and steal money, and they were, you know, trying to create chaos to make Israel look bad. But I could just tell you that I've been in contact with former Americans as recently as yesterday who were part of the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, and I was reading how the Arab News, which is a mouthpiece of the Saudi government, referred to them as shooting at civilians and creating chaos, not to mention that Israel was targeting with live ammunition civilians and killing hundreds, which was far from the reality, but that was the reality that was painted going forward. You have to remember, Hamas's job here is to take the aid. There are two types of aid. There's aid that is food, and then there's more commercial aid. It doesn't make a difference. They're going to take it, steal it, tax it, and they are going to make a lot of money on it. And that is part of the way that they remain a dominant force, as I alluded to earlier. As far as Americans being involved here, America and right now really doesn't have the leverage it could, because the leverage it has is through two Muslim Brotherhood countries, Qatar and Turkey, whose interests are in Hamas staying there. And of course, Israel, rightly, for its national security interests, doesn't want to have Qatar or Turkey there. And so there's no incentive for them to put real pressure on Hamas to let international aid go around. Many of these other international aid companies, organizations, UNRWA, of course, being the most notorious or infamous, basically start with a narrative that Israel is the bad guy and will paint Israel in the worst possible light, despite me knowing I was actually in the 2014 war covering when a Maglan unit was being fired from an UNRWA children's clinic. You know, so whether it's tunnels underneath or being used as bases, UNRWA and other alphabet soup of different organizations really cannot be trusted, and you have to expect the aid to be stolen, and Hamas is going to get stronger because of the aid. But as far as the humanitarian fund, it was effective. There was the great allegation that people had to walk a distance to go through a battlefield, if you will, to get the aid. But that was only because Hamas was creating the primary chaos of what was going on. They wanted it to fail. So I think it's something, when you look back, not perfect, but really did distribute a lot of aid and should be commended. And the way it's being disparaged at this point, and I'm somebody who's met with some former American soldiers who were part of it, and these were wonderful people. And as an American, I'm proud that they were involved in it. But again, when you go through the laundry room of the Middle East, how it was laundered, that it was not positive and they did bad things, much farther, the truth is much farther of really good things that they did.
Right, well, that wouldn't be the first time that we've seen reporting that isn't accurate about what's going on in Gaza. I'm going to ask both of you, because you both brought it up, the question of UNRWA. Crucial question about UNRWA. The Palestinians will demand that they remain active in Gaza, of course, but from Israel's perspective, UNRWA is one of the main facilitators of terrorism in Gaza, and also of the narrative that the Gazans don't belong in Gaza, but rather need to move into Israel via right of return. So the question is, what is going to happen with UNRWA in Gaza right now? Are they even how active are they in the current situation? And is Israel or the United States trying to put any pressure in order to remove some of the nefarious influence that UNRWA has? Start with you, Olga, about that.
Well, all of this entire issue is a political issue at the end of the day. Yes, there are challenges in providing humanitarian aid and how you check it, for sure. But even the Gaza Humanitarian Fund that did a decent job, right, under incredibly difficult circumstances, right, was met with uniform criticism by the entire humanitarian community, including UNRWA and all the UN agencies. Basically, instead of working with them, they were criticizing them and boycotting them, which is part of the reason why it was so difficult for them to do anything on the ground.
What was their pretext for boycotting them?
Well, first of all, because Gaza Humanitarian Fund came in and said, our task is to provide aid, not to politicize or do political activism or work with Hamas, right? So the Americans came and said, we're contractors. There's a task. They almost approached it as a business enterprise, whereas the entire humanitarian community, all the NGOs, the international organizations, and all the UN agencies, for years, for decades, worked closely with Hamas, knew exactly what Hamas was doing. They were providing cash assistance, aid, allocations according to Hamas lists and allowing Hamas to cut anywhere between 20 and 40% commission, basically tax, what Eric was talking about. So there were multiple layers of theft, right? Now, UNRWA was part of that problem. The Palestinians will insist to keep UNRWA because UNRWA is also a unique political institution perpetuating this image, this narrative of Palestinian right of return, where we all know, let's just demystify it and zoom out from the aid, right, issue. If there is a right to return, there is no Israel. We all understand what the stakes are.
And this is a contradiction from the UN, because the UN says they are for the two-state solution, yet they are funding and supporting the mission of UNRWA, which is a one-state...
And only working for one state, right?
Yeah.
Now, the Israeli government already outlawed UNRWA, basically said we are not to work with any entity, anything that has to do with UNRWA, which is already technically a complex situation. But whether they're called, I have very big reservations about any UN agency and their ability to do a different job or a significantly different job than UNRWA. But whatever we call them, the big question is, whoever ends up working and doing that job, they will still have to work with, 35,000 local employees, Gazans. Yeah. And they need to be controlled. They need to be vetted. They need to be held accountable that if they incite, if they teach hatred in schools, if they call for violence or are Hamas operatives, they need to be sanctioned. Whether UNRWA can do it or someone else, the demand is ultimately the same. And it's the Gazans who also have been towing the line, if for no other reason, because they don't know any different reality. This is their only reality, living in a Hamas-led police state. It's not the international community would like to discuss Gaza and the day after in the terminology that we understand, which is liberal democracies, right? But that is not the reality in Gaza. The reality in Gaza is a complete Stasi-like police state.
Right, Eric, we're kind of running out of time, so we're going to move a bit on from UNRWA and the Muslim Brotherhood, which is something that you talked about earlier, because U.S. President Donald Trump banned the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States now, or has declared his intention to do so, which is a massive, massive move. And of course, Hamas is the Palestine branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. But on the other hand, he's working with Qatar and Turkey, who have Muslim Brotherhood affiliation. So and Trump in general, I mean, he's dancing on a lot of different things here, kind of contradicting himself. So what is the real Trump, or is this all part of the grand plan to achieve a big deal in the Middle East?
Well, Trump in his first term wanted to declare the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization, but was basically fought against it. People made the claim, you know, it's an ideology. How can you ban an ideology? But it's way more than an ideology, and it's organized mainly in secret. That has a long-term plan to infect the West with the virus of Islamism, and sow discord and undermine the West. And I think you're seeing parts of that that went on with the college campuses after October 7th. So it wasn't a total ban by President Trump. It looks like they're going to look at these case by case. And once you're going case by case, you know that Qatar and Turkey are going to get a pass. But what is Qatar and Turkey? Qatar is the financier of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Turkey, Erdogan, has turned that country from a secular Muslim state into an Islamist Muslim Brotherhood state. We'll call it the muscle of the Muslim Brotherhood.
So is that Trump, though, just showing some realism, though, maybe? Because he's done that in the past where, you know, he showers praise on countries that may be not aligned with his values or America's values, but he knows he needs them in order to achieve what he wants to achieve, like maybe normalization or some other grand deal with the Palestinians, Palestinian Authority. He knows he needs Qatar and Turkey, like being realistic, perhaps? Or is that just a miscalculation of Trump?
So I think he's, at least what we know, is giving them way too much leeway. He should be behind the scenes pressuring these countries. Qatar has given sanctuary not only to Hamas, but to the Taliban and you name it, organizations that are across the radical Sunni jihadist world. It also works with the radical Shiite world closely with Iran. It is not a neutral party there. And so what we need to do here in America is to tell Qatar, you have a lot of good things that we like. We like your Al Udeid Air Base, but you have to stop infecting the world with Al Jazeera, which is anti-American, anti-Semitic. You, Turkey, have to stop wanting to replace Iran in control of Syria and turn that into an Islamist state with al-Shira. And I think, unfortunately, at least again on the surface, President Trump seems blind to these things and like these strong men that are there. But unless you deal with those two countries, you're going to have a real uphill battle. But in the United States, the one thing that we really have to get our handle on here is the Qatari Foundation run by the emir's mother, who is propagandizing and teaching education from K to 12 all through the universities, turning them into anti-American places, certainly anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic universities and K through 12, and it's infecting all there. We need to end Qatari foreign funding of our educational system. That is the Muslim Brotherhood in action.
Right. Just final question here, Olga, before we wrap up, regarding U.S. involvement, because as you said earlier, the only country that really can effectively do anything in Gaza is the United States. But on the other hand, the United States is influenced by the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood. So from Israel's perspective, is this good, the developments that we're seeing?
Well, they're better than where we were, right? Let's imagine a parallel situation where Europeans were tasked with crafting a solution. So I think everything is relative. In that sense, we're okay with U.S. Taking the lead. But that said, I think, and I agree pretty much with Eric's opening remarks, that unless Israel takes charge and makes sure that Hamas is at least under control, I'm not as optimistic that we will actually succeed in disarming them, especially that disarming them, the challenge is not only weapons, physical weapons. Their sphere of political influence and their propaganda and their proxies they surpass the physical borders of Gaza. But as long as IDF and the Israeli government keep control and are extremely involved in what is going on, I think we will be able to control the situation, or at least maintain it. I think, sadly, we're not where we would have wanted to be, which is solving the Gaza question after horrific 2 years.
It's like just another big round compared to all the rounds that happened, which is what Israel wanted to avoid.
And I've been sharing my concern from the beginning, right after October the 7th, that we should have ensured that we don't end up in yet another cyclical decade, right, where there's going to be higher, lower cycles, but at the end of the day, it pretty much is shaping up to be exactly that.
Right. Well, that's, as we see, some positive things, some negative, very uncertain situation, and a very precarious situation at the moment, the situation in Gaza of what will be in the future. Not all of it is in Israel's hands. Part of it is in the hands of the United States and other players. We're going to have to wait and see how it all develops. Olga Deutsch, the Vice President of NGO Monitor, thank you so much for coming in and giving your analysis, and Dr. Eric Mandel, founder and director of the Middle East Political and Information Network, especially also that information on the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, setting the record straight. Thank you very much for that, both of you, for coming in. And that is all for this edition of Insider on ILTV. If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, and subscribe for more analysis from Israel and the Middle East, and tune in to our 24/7 streaming channel and download the ILTV app. I'm Alec Pollard. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next edition of Insider.
Israel has approved a new plan to bring the remaining members of India's Bnei Menashe community to Israel by 2030. The group identifies as descendants of the biblical tribe of Manasseh, and they are among India's last Jewish communities. Our correspondent, India Naftali, has the details.
Israel's government has now approved a 5-year plan to bring the majority of the remaining Bnei Menashe community from India to Israel. The decision, submitted by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Aliyah and Integration Minister Ophir Sofer, will enable about 5,800 community members to make Aliyah by the year 2030. Around 1,200 are expected to arrive by the end of 2026. There are currently an estimated 5,000 Bnei Menashe already living in Israel, most having arrived over the past 2 decades under previous government initiatives. The Bnei Menashe live primarily in the northeastern Indian states of Mizoram and Manipur, within the Kuki-Chin and Mizo communities. They are descendants of the biblical tribe of Manasseh, one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and are considered among India's last remaining Jewish communities. Under the plan, all new arrivals will undergo Orthodox conversion through the chief rabbinate. They will mainly settle in the north of the country, part of a broader effort to rebuild and strengthen the communities of the Galilee region following the war. Prime Minister Netanyahu called the move an important and Zionist decision, saying it will provide a boost to the north and help reunite families long divided between India and Israel. Aliyah Minister Sofer praised the decision as part of a wider wave of immigration in recent years, saying this Aliyah strengthens Israel's resilience, solidarity, and national renewal. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said the move marks a renewed connection of brothers who have carried the yearning for Zion for generations. A government delegation is set to travel to India within days to begin processing applications. The operation will be coordinated by the Chief Rabbinate, the Conversion Authority, the Population and Immigration Authority, the Foreign Ministry, and the Jewish Agency. The first phase of the plan is budgeted at 90 million shekels through 2026. The funds will cover immigration costs, conversion, housing and absorption centers, Hebrew language programs, and employment support, helping the new arrivals integrate smoothly into their communities in the north.
And so, as Israel approves this landmark plan to bring the entire Bnei Menashe community home by 2030, we are now joined by India Naftali to discuss this issue here in studio. Thanks for joining us, India.
Thank you so much, Sivan.
So let's, to begin, understand, for viewers less familiar with this whole, with this community, who are the Bnei Menashe? What is their story?
So the Bnei Menashe are a Jewish community located in northeast India. They come from the tribe of Manasseh. They were in the land of Israel 2,700 years ago. They were exiled by the Assyrians, and they've been out of the land of Israel ever since. So for generations, they've been keeping Jewish customs and laws, keeping Shabbat, Jewish purity rituals, and that is really their claim to Judaism. You know, they're one of the 10 lost tribes, and they're about a population of 10,000. They're part of India's very small Jewish population.
And now, what does this decision actually mean? How significant is it that Israel has now committed to bringing the entire Bnei Menashe community, roughly 6,000 people, by the end of the decade?
So this is historic, Sivan. I mean, this is the first time that the government has ever approved such a large mass aliyah. If we talk about the aliyah of the Ethiopian Jews, they were brought in several operations and waves. And this framework that's happening with the Bnei Menashe to bring the remaining roughly 6,000 that are in India, it's happening in one go, in one framework. So this is the first time. There's going to be families that have been separated for 20 years who haven't been able to make aliyah, that have been in India, and who are now going to be reunited with the roughly 5,000 Bnei Menashe community members here in Israel. Now, for you to understand, I mentioned in my piece that they're going to have to go through a conversion process, a Orthodox Jewish conversion process. So you might ask yourself, if they're Jewish, why would they have to go through that process?
Right.
Well, the answer is this. So because they've been exiled so long in the diaspora for over 2,000 years, the Judaism they practice
isn't exactly the same as rabbinical Judaism, which was created after the destruction of the First Temple, and they left right around that time of the destruction of First Temple. So the Judaism they practice is from that time era, and as we know, that rabbinical Judaism was created afterwards. So now that we're going to see them. That their Judaism aligns with rabbinical Judaism that is considered halakha here in Israel.
Halakha, Jewish law here in Israel. So to make sure that everyone is aligned.
In the same practice of Judaism.
None of us are really 100% aligned,
That's
but
right.
more or less. All right, so the state delegation is flying to India within days, and the government allocated 90 million shekels for this first phase, covering conversion and housing and Hebrew education and integration. What challenges do you think that the state will face in absorbing such a large wave of immigrants?
Certainly the question of education, a lot of them come from communities where they don't have traditional education, so coming and finding job placement might be a difficult issue. But like you said, 90 million shekels is a huge pledge to make sure that these new members of our society have a smooth landing, and it's going to be invested in hopefully education, definitely housing, and they already have quite a significant community here to welcome them and show them the ropes.
And what are some of the actual community members saying about this big move?
Sivan, I know people who it's been their entire life's work for the past 20 years to bring this piece of the diaspora home to Israel. So for them, this is a completion of their life's dream. I mean, this is just the beginning of a historic moment of really bringing all Jews from across the world home to Israel.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, it will be incredible to see this new wave of aliyah, of immigration coming to Israel, integrating, absorbing, and joining the Israeli public here in Israel, the Holy Land. Thank you very much, India, Naftali.
Thank you, Sivan. Back to ILTV on the Hour. We're bringing you the biggest headlines of Israel and the region. I'm Devo Klein, and this is your roundup of all of the latest developments coming out of Israel. We have initial reports of airstrikes in two different locations. The first being southern Lebanon. The IDF is striking Hezbollah positions there. And the second in Jenin in northern Samaria. We await more information regarding the Lebanon strikes. But the Jenin strikes come as the IDF and Israel Border Police are engaged in another day of counterterrorism operations. Just in the past night, IDF troops detained multiple suspects while searching for weapons in the Tubas area in northern Samaria. Raids were conducted in areas where intelligence suggests local terror groups attempted to establish presence. The operation details are now revealed. The raids begin with an airstrike directed by ground troops to isolate the area before allowing foot soldiers to enter alongside border police officers. The ground forces conduct searches and raids before detaining suspects and beginning interrogation. According to preliminary reports, the IDF and Shin Bet arrested or questioned 60 people. And in an interesting twist, among those detained and later released was Samir Basharat, the mayor of prominent Arab town Tamun. And moving to Gaza, the IDF this morning confirmed the elimination of 3 terror operatives in 2 different incidents. In both instances, armed terrorists crossed the yellow line into the IDF-controlled area per the ceasefire, thus violating the agreement and actively threatening troops on the ground. In the south of the Strip, Kfir Brigade soldiers eliminated a Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist by ordering airstrikes to target the gunman. A short time later, surveillance teams identified another terrorist approaching troops in southern Gaza. Soldiers of the Gaza's Division Southern Brigade opened fire and eliminated him. And in the north, the Air Force struck and killed a Hamas operative who the IDF says was preparing an imminent sniper attack against Israeli troops, publishing the video of the strike. These recurring incidents reflect the current situation in Rafah as dozens of Hamas terrorists are still trapped underground.
hiding in a tunnel on the IDF-held side of the Yellow Line. But for the first time in weeks, Israeli media reported a solution in a proposal sent through mediators. Israel has offered the terrorists to surrender, disarm, and move to Israeli prisons, later to be transferred to the Hamas-controlled Gaza. But so far, the gunmen are refusing, and at this point it's unclear whether the message is even making it to these trapped terrorists. And speaking of Hamas, in a disturbing development, Israel's defense establishment is warning that Hamas is quietly rebuilding its rule in the Gaza Strip, and faster than many in the cabinet realize. Senior defense officials told ministers that 13 of Gaza's 25 municipalities are back to full activity, once again run by Hamas. According to reports, Hamas police are redeployed at checkpoints, infrastructure is being repaired, and security sources say the organization has re-established its control in the minds of Gazans. Reports also confirm that Hamas has resumed checkpoint operations and is back to collecting taxes from truck drivers, just as it did before the war. This rapid rebuilding is igniting new tensions between Jerusalem and Washington. The Trump administration is pushing ahead with the next phase of its 20-point plan for the Gaza's day after, even as Israel warns that Hamas remains armed, entrenched, and deeply involved in local decision-making. With the U.S. struggling to assemble a multinational stabilization force, Washington is turning to interim solutions that Israel strongly rejects. Defense officials say the conclusion is clear. If the United States does not move to dismantle Hamas, Israel will have to do it instead. And in an exciting story, an exciting development, 8 Israeli restaurants have been ranked among the very best in the world. The ranking comes from the prestigious La Liste, one of the most respected global rankings, which included Israeli cuisine in their top 1,000 restaurants from around the world. Now, this is a major milestone for the Israeli food scene and a massive international win, with 7 of the restaurants making the list from Tel Aviv and 1 being in Jerusalem. This is a massive show not just of resilience, but resilience during wartime, as Israel continues to impress the world. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Don't forget to scan the QR code on your screen for more updates. I'm Deva Klein, and thanks so much for watching.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader, and this week we're taking a look at the bad faith attacks on Christian Zionists, which were spearheaded by folks like Tucker Carlson. We'll speak to Sandra Hagee Parker, the chairwoman of Christians United for Israel Action Fund, to explore the theological basis for Christian Zionism, plus a deep dive into how the Islamic Republic of Iran continues to evade sanctions, even while the country is seemingly collapsing internally. First, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the Gaza Strip. A supposed ceasefire may be in effect, even though Hamas is currently in violation of it for many weeks, given they're still holding 3 hostage bodies. But the U.S. administration isn't letting that stop them from pushing forward with a proposal for later stages of this same agreement. This new international plan being pushed at the UN by the United States to govern the Gaza Strip, it would create a transnational authority that would control security, administration, and borders in the Gaza Strip. Now, already Russia has put forward its own version, endorsing Palestinian statehood, and both superpowers are trying to shape the future of Gaza from thousands of miles away. The idea that they're selling is simple: put Gaza under international control, bring in neutral security forces, remove Hamas from power, hold elections, and create a path to stability. But what they're proposing is not just unrealistic, it's dangerous, and it's been done before. Every time the West has attempted to engineer governance in highly radicalized or internally divided societies, it has failed. We've seen this again and again. The United States forced elections in Gaza previously, and Hamas won in a landslide. Then they carried out a violent coup against Fatah. In Lebanon, UNIFIL was supposed to disarm Hezbollah, with millions of U.S. taxpayer dollars being poured into international force. But Hezbollah is now more powerful than the Lebanese army. Iraq, after the United States invasion, descended into sectarian war and eventually gave rise to ISIS. Libya collapsed into chaos and militia rule after the NATO intervention. Afghanistan received 20 years of Western nation building and fell back into Taliban control the moment the United States left. The lesson is consistent. When the West imposes its own models on societies that are deeply tribal, religiously motivated, and politically fractured, the project collapses and leaves a bigger crisis behind. Now, skeptics may look at West Germany or Japan after World War II as examples of successful foreign-guided transitions, but these cases are not remotely comparable to Gaza or the Arab world. Both countries were already coherent nation-states. They had functioning civil infrastructure, they weren't divided by clan-based or sectarian factions, and most importantly, they were not ruled by a radical Islamic theocracy or exposed to transnational jihadist ideology. None of the conditions that made Germany and Japan successful are present in Gaza today. And this brings us to a central problem. There is no real evidence that this international plan could successfully remove Hamas from power or disarm them. Not one country involved in this plan has explained how they would physically disarm a terror army that has spent years building bunkers, weapon stockpiles, and underground cities. And history shows why these promises should not be believed. United Nations Resolution 1559 ordered Hezbollah to disarm. It never happened. United Nations Resolution 1701 reiterated it years later. Never happened. Hezbollah only grew stronger. There's no reason to believe that Gaza would be any different. In fact, this plan sends the exact opposite message. It tells Palestinians that October 7th, which was not about statehood, but about erasing Israel, has resulted in international pressure for a new political process. That signal rewards terrorism and teaches that extreme violence leads to political gains. It undermines the few remaining moderates in Palestinian society and further destroys the authority of the Palestinian Authority. And let's not ignore the core of the conflict, Palestinian rejectionism. Every major plan for peace or statehood since 1937 has been rejected by Palestinian leadership. And polling shows that a large majority of Palestinians celebrated October 7th attacks. This is not a society prepared for responsible governance or peaceful coexistence. It's a society radicalized through education, media, and religious incitement for generations. No international committee can undo that in a year, or even in a decade. If the West truly wants to help Palestinians, it must do what this plan refuses to address. It must support the slow development of responsible leadership. It must end the pay-for-slay payments. It must reform textbooks. It must hold leaders accountable for incitement in Arabic. And it must make all aid conditional on real political reform. It must shut down UNRWA, which has spent decades entrenching radicalization instead of resolving it. The only path to a lasting future is when two sovereign nations decide their future together of their own will. It can't be forced from the outside. Every attempt to do so has failed, and this plan will fail for the same reasons. And now on to our headlines. We have a lot to unpack this week when it comes to Iran. First up, the water crisis in Iran has morphed into a direct threat to the regime's very survival. Tehran, with some 10 million residents, is preparing for regular water cuts as dams fail and years of mismanagement collide with a severe drought. Now, the situation is worse than the regime is willing to admit. According to the most recent data, only 23.2 billion cubic meters of water entered Iran's dams by August 2025. That's a drop of 42% compared to last year and represents one of the lowest inflows in recorded history. More than half of major reservoirs are at or below 50% capacity, and one of Tehran's key dams is down to 8%. Nationwide, 10% of Iran's dams are effectively dry. Now, groundwater data is even more alarming. Iran currently extracts approximately 57 billion cubic meters of groundwater every year. And of Iran's 609 aquifers, more than 300 are in critical condition. Per capita renewable water resources have collapsed from nearly 4,500 cubic meters in the 1970s to roughly 1,500 today, which puts Iran firmly below the global water stress threshold. Now, the incompetent government blames climate change, but in reality, it's actually because of decades of corrupt infrastructure spending, shoddy maintenance, and the diversion of water to elite districts that's turned this resource crunch into a full-blown political crisis. Protests are already beginning in smaller towns where tap water is running out, and citizens are angry that their basic survival comes after the regime's foreign terror projects. This matters for Israel, of course, and its allies because a domestic crackup inside Iran could push the regime to escalate through its terror proxies or even through its nuclear program as a way to deflect public anger. Now, the water crisis also reveals a central truth about the Islamic Republic. This is a regime that talks about exporting revolution and building proxy armies, but it can't even keep the taps running in its own capital. Well, the trouble from the Islamic Republic of Iran doesn't end with the domestic crisis. However, the regime has once again escalated maritime tensions in the region after the IRGC Navy seized the Marshall Islands-flagged tanker Talara in the Gulf of Oman this week. The ship was carrying approximately 30,000 tons of petrochemical product when multiple fast craft surrounded it and forced it into Iranian territorial waters under what Tehran claims is a judicial order. Now, this incident took place just about 40 kilometers off the UAE coast near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important energy chokeholds on the planet. Now, the significance of this move really cannot be overstated. First, it's a direct assertion of power by the Islamic Republic in a critical global trade route, where approximately 20% of the world's seaborne oil passes daily. By seizing a foreign tanker mid-transit, the Islamic Republic sends a clear message that it can disrupt global energy flows at any time it wants, sanctions or not. This is maritime coercion. Second, this seizure comes at a moment of heightened regional pressure on Tehran. After months of Israeli and American action against Iranian proxy terror networks and infrastructure, the regime is signaling that while its economy is struggling and water reservoirs are collapsing, it still has hard power options that can create global consequences. Third, it's not an isolated incident. The Islamic Republic of Iran has a long history of using tanker seizures to extract leverage and retaliate against international pressure. Now, it's done this repeatedly over the past decade, and every time it makes one thing clear. Even under sanctions, Iran's maritime and oil networks remain active and dangerous. For Israel and its allies, this serves as a warning. The energy waterways are a key front in Iran's strategic playbook. The Talara incident is a reminder that the Islamic Republic can project power far beyond its borders, and that any plan to contain the regime must include maritime security and tighter coordination against Iran's shadow fleet, which I'll get into in just a few minutes. So how are they getting away with it? Now, most disturbingly, data shows that the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is under heavy sanctions, has actually peaked in oil exports in the month of October, begging the question, how? Let's break it down. The truth is this regime is still making tens of billions of dollars every year from oil. Not quietly, not secretly, but openly. This is the single most important financial story driving the security crisis in the Middle East. It's the reason the regime can threaten Israel. It's the reason Hezbollah remains armed to the teeth. It's the reason the Houthis are able to fire missiles. It's the reason Iranian drones reach Europe and Africa. And almost no one is talking about it or understands what's actually happening. Despite sanctions, the regime is still exporting well over 1.4 million barrels of oil every single day. Now, if the global price of oil is $80 a barrel, Iran is selling it at a discount that brings it to about $60 or $65 a barrel. That means the regime earns approximately $100 million per day, every 24 hours, and none of it is going to the Iranian people. It doesn't rebuild hospitals. It doesn't fix the collapsing water system. It doesn't help families who cannot afford bread due to 40 to 50% inflation. This money goes straight to the regime's military system and its proxy terror network. And how does Iran get away with this while supposedly being under sanctions? It's because the regime has spent 4 decades building a global sanctions evasion machine, a perfected criminal economy run by the IRGC. They operate one of the largest illegal shipping networks on the planet. Analysts call it the ghost fleet. These are more than 300 old and, frankly, unreliable tankers that constantly change their names, fake their flag registrations, turn off their tracking systems, and vanish from radar. They perform ship-to-ship transfers in the middle of the ocean, usually at night. They repaint the hulls. They falsify documents. They spoof coordinates. Some of these vessels even travel with navigation systems turned off, which, of course, is incredibly dangerous, simply to avoid detection. And where does all this oil go? Almost all of it goes to China. China is the financial lifeline of the Islamic Republic. Chinese refiners buy discounted Iranian crude that is marketed as Malaysian blend or Oman heavy or generic fuel oil. This is not speculation. It's thoroughly documented by Reuters, tanker trackers, and multiple United States Treasury designations. So to summarize, the regime sells illegal oil, China knowingly buys illegal oil, and the world pretends not to notice because cheap oil benefits everyone except the Iranian people and all those who suffer from the terrorism that this regime exports. Now let's talk about where that money actually goes. Once the regime gets paid, likely through restricted Chinese accounts, the funds are controlled by the IRGC. The Revolutionary Guards and the Quds Force command these revenue streams through networks of front companies and, allegedly, through the giant construction and logistics conglomerate known as Khatam al-Anbiya. The money is then distributed across the regime's terror portfolio. Now, according to U.S. intelligence assessments, congressional research reports, and U.S. Treasury designations, Hezbollah receives an estimated $700 million to $1 billion per year. The Houthis in Yemen receive between $150 and $250 million. Iraqi militias receive between $100 million and $200 million. And Hamas receives an estimated $70 to $100 million each year, in addition to weapons, training, intelligence support, and engineering assistance for rockets and drone systems. So when people ask how Hezbollah keeps stockpiling rockets, or how the Houthis continue firing ballistic missiles, or how the Islamic Republic continues to expand its nuclear program despite sanctions, the answer is simple. The Islamic Republic of Iran is still making money every single day, and sanctions are not being enforced. Now here is the part that almost no one talks about. We could shut this down tomorrow. The only thing missing is the political will. There are 5 major pressure points that could crush the regime's revenue stream without firing a single shot. First, target the ghost fleet. Don't sanction ship names, which can be changed. Instead, sanction the hull numbers, which cannot be changed. If the United States and European Union banned 200 hull numbers from receiving insurance or entering ports, half of Iran's export capacity would collapse instantly. Second, go after the Chinese refineries that knowingly purchase Iranian crude. These facilities depend on Western equipment and Western financing. If even 3 of them were sanctioned, the entire network could collapse. Third, hit the front companies. Most of these firms in Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and the UAE will collapse the moment they're listed by the U.S. Treasury. 4, seize ships again. When the United States captured the giant tanker known as Grace 1, it disrupted the regime's smuggling operations for months. Repeated seizures could deter the entire network. 5, cyber disruption. The IRGC uses specific Chinese bank accounts, cryptocurrency wallets, and payment pipelines for its oil trade. Cyber operations targeting these channels can cripple the entire machine. This is how you can collapse the Islamic Republic's financial backbone without a war, and how you force the regime to choose between funding terror proxies and surviving internally. The Islamic Republic is not sanctioned in practice, it's sanctioned on paper. And the moment the world chooses to enforce those sanctions with real consequences, Iran's financial lifeline ends. Now, jumping back to Israel, today we have a very special guest joining us to shed some light on the perspective of Christian Zionists after the recent fallout from pundits like Tucker Carlson, who now famously stated that he hates Christian Zionists and has been spearheading a hate campaign against them, along with several others who are self-declared right-wing pundits. Now, Sandra Hagee Parker is the chairwoman of Christians United for Israel Action Fund. She's also an attorney, author, and public speaker. This fund supports a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, standing up to anti-Semitism, defending Israel's right to self-defense and self-determination. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us today on Axis of Truth. We're at a very unusual time in America, particularly, and in recent weeks, we've seen an alarming, well, what I consider alarming resurgence of blatant anti-Semitism in America, not only from Islamists, but from far-right extremists like Nick Fuentes. One of the most concerning aspects is that they're claiming to be Christian nationalists and to be supporters of President Trump. What's your take on this hijacking of Christianity that we see?
Emily, you said it exactly as it is. It's a hijacking. It is usurping the banner of Christianity in order to legitimize one's anti Semitism. And funnily enough, it's not new. This is something that has happened for centuries, whether you're talking about the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, Martin Luther, Adolf Hitler. Every generation has tried and failed to use the banner of Christianity as a way to authorize them to say and do whatever they want to the Jewish people and after 1948, the modern state of Israel.
Now, how can Christians fight against this pernicious trend of those speaking in the name of Christianity, yet actively espousing anti Semitic canards and stereotypes?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing for every single Christian to remember is that the Bible is above the Constitution, right? Right now, we kind of have this like wrapping ourselves in the American flag and free speech and the First Amendment. And of course, this is America and we hold that value sacrosanct. But your party is not your faith. And MAGA is not the same thing as being a Christian. And being a conservative is not the same thing as being a Christian. And I can understand how people can get confused because sometimes the platform of the Republican Party or conservatism has wrapped itself in Judeo-Christian values, which is outstanding. However, it's up to the Christian to be able to discern when what is being said from their party or their favorite pundit contravenes the word of God. And when it does, the word of God prevails. So it's important for a Christian to know why they support the state of Israel, because if their favorite pundit or their favorite party comes against the state of Israel, they cannot be moved.
Now, you frequently cited passages such as Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you, and Romans 11:1 and 2, in support of Christian Zionism as an aspect of Christian theology itself. Could you break down how you interpret those texts as mandating active support for Israel, and how you respond to critics who say this interpretation conflates theology with foreign policy?
Well, first of all, Israel is not a policy issue for members of Christians United for Israel. It is not a political issue, it is a biblical issue. And for those of us that are old enough, we can all remember when American politics saw Israel the same way. Democrats and Republicans, independent, what have you, were pretty much unanimous in how they viewed the nation of Israel. So that modern politics decided to make Israel a policy issue is not on Christians. From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible is a Zionist document. Christians, non-denominational evangelical Christians specifically, believe the entire Bible is true. The Old Testament is just as relevant as the New Testament. The Old Testament we see as God's will concealed. The New Testament is God's will revealed. Of course, they are written to different parties, different persons, but for the same purpose. And when you read in the Old Testament, when people say Old Covenant, you know, those are all euphemisms for replacement theology to try to make you think that the Old Testament is not relevant anymore. If the Old Testament is not relevant anymore, then God is not a covenant-keeping God, and God is a promise breaker. The Bible is either all true or it's all false. And so Christians believe, not just with respect to what the Bible says about the nation of Israel, Christians believe that with respect to everything, the Bible is true. God has left us a rule book, right? And so we don't make the rules, we just read them. And the Bible is extremely clear about the covenant that God made with the Jewish people. The Bible says that God's name is in Jerusalem, that Israel is the apple of God's eye. If Israel is important to God, then it is important to a Christian. Similarly, in the New Testament, when Paul says, I am of the tribe of Benjamin, have I been cast aside? Certainly not. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. I could go on, but you would have to have a faith that I am not capable of maintaining to go through the theological acrobatics to convince yourself that Christians have replaced Jews in the economy of God and that Israel is no longer important to God or Christians.
Recently, political pundit Tucker Carlson stated that he hates Christian Zionists, labeling some of their beliefs as a brain virus or even Christian heresy. Alarmingly, we also see a huge outpouring of support for Carlson instead of condemnation, even from many self-proclaimed Christian voices. Why do you think this is happening now, and how would you respond to these kinds of attacks?
Cowardice is why it's happening, whether one doesn't want to be ostracized from, I won't say the mainstream media because that doesn't exist anymore, right? It's about podcasts and all of these things. It used to be in news, if it bleeds, it leads. Now it's if it clicks, it sticks. And so it's hilarious to me that pundits, whose job is quite literally to have an opinion and to let their opinion be known, all of a sudden say, we're friends. I don't care if you're friends. Have them over for Christmas. It's irrelevant to me. But what do you say? What is your opinion about the views that he is espousing, about the views that he is legitimizing? As a pundit, your job is to either embrace or distance yourself from those. And I think evidence of the fact that Christian Zionists are here and not going away is the fact that Tucker issued a half-hearted, you can't even call it an apology. It's kind of like, that's not what I meant. Because whoops, millions of people don't like being told that they have brain rot. Because millions of people are actually educated on the Bible, and they see through his efforts to delegitimize Judaism, to de-Judaize Jesus. And, they're not going to stand for it. So we're only going to see more from the grassroots of Christians United for Israel, from the Christian church in general, whether you're a member of CUFI or not, that this is a bridge too far, because we believe that the creation of the modern state of Israel, the Bible says a nation will be born in a day. The Jewish people coming to live in Israel are proof that God Almighty is who he says he is. And if you do not believe that, then you do not believe the Bible.
Does this kind of rhetoric matter in terms of how Christian Zionists are perceived? And will it affect your position or the position of CUFI going forward?
I mean, in terms of our mission, our mission will always remain clear. We have always been willing to go where the fight is. When we started CUFI, people were like, are you kidding? Anti-Semitism isn't real. Like, this is not 1940. What are you doing? And so we will always go where the fight is. And if that fight is now to what I would call the right of the right, I still think that we're absolutely dealing with fringe elements in the Republican Party. Of course, the largest vulnerability being the young people. We have seen how the policies in the classroom that are taught become the policies in the public square. And we have seen that what happened in America's colleges and universities after 10/7 shows the influence not of organic activism, but foreign influence have on America's colleges and universities. You've heard the rumor and innuendo of, who Tucker may or may not be partnered with respect to his business in terms of their influence in media. You've seen in entertainment. Entertainers go to Qatar and the Middle East, and then all of a sudden come back, and comedians who have no business and foreign policy, much less a working knowledge, say Israel be genocide. And you can see the influence of the enemies of Israel. The church cannot be bought and will not be bought. And as such, it's our job to do what we can to combat lies with truth and to show anybody that has any questions as to Israel, its role in the Bible, the Jewish people, and our mandate to stand with them. It's our job to make sure that they understand that and to create a place for them to feel welcomed to express that view.
How would you respond to the claim that Christian Zionists and all Zionists are putting Israel first and not America first? What does America first even mean to you?
America first doesn't mean America only. The Bible doesn't say America first, right? I am a Christian and I have national pride. I am not a Christian nationalist. To operate at the exclusion of others, I think, is kind of fundamentally unchristian. However, when I hear America first, when I hear President Trump say America first, I know President Trump doesn't mean America only. And you can see Trump's actions to see that he doesn't think it means America only. And if you are truly America first and you look at it completely agnostically and you don't give any mind to any other nation other than your own, then the most rational and reasonable thing that you can do as an American is continue to ally with Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, to continue to invest in Israel, because America doesn't spend money in Israel. America doesn't give foreign aid to Israel. America invests to Israel with an ROI that is exponential. People say aid as if they have their handout asking for help. They are doing us a solid. They are fighting our shared enemies. They are defending our shared values. And by the way, they are buying machines and tools that we make in the United States of America, quite literally job stimulus and creation, improving upon it and sharing it with us for free. So hate Israel all you want, but if you care about America and if you care about your nation and if you care about national security and if you care about maintaining the American exceptionalism that has so far been responsible for relative peace in the world, then you should continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with the nation of Israel and her people, because they are a large part of making sure that that continues.
As a final question, I want to ask you why it's important, not just at the theological level, but at a practical level, for Christians to stand with Israel and the Jewish people, especially now. I mean, would you differentiate even between the two, and why or why not?
It's a three-legged stool: God, Israel, and Jewish people. One doesn't exist without the other. And again, the existence of the three of them are proof that God is who he says he is, that the Bible is real. So to answer your question, though, we're not going to look at it through that righteous prism. Let's look at it through the rational prism. Again, we don't make the rules, we read the rules. And God doesn't differentiate between Jews and the nation of Israel. It's for God to differentiate and decide, but we aren't God, right? And so we aren't here to cherry pick who's Jewish enough, who's not Jewish enough, etc. The mandate is clear. And like I said, if you don't want to look at the Bible as a theological document, you don't have to believe in it. Look at history. What has history shown us? History has shown us that every single nation that has come against the nation of Israel has failed. And not only have they failed, they are in the dustbin of history. Of course, if you look at ancient history, you have the pharaohs, you have Haman, who hung from the gallows that he built for the children of Israel. In modern history, you have, we'll skip over the Ottomans and, all of those things, but go to more modern history, you have Hitler. Where are the goose-stepping Nazis? They're gone. You now have what we'll call the sons of Haman: Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. The day after the nation of Israel was born, it was attacked by 5 nations. Explain to me how a nation that was born in a day can defend itself against a larger enemy, against an enemy with more weapons, against an enemy with more people. A nation the size of Rhode Island that has been fighting a 7-front war for 2 years is victorious only because there is a God, he is real, and what he says is true. Whether you believe that or not, look at what history has shown us. If you come against the nation of Israel, including the modern state of Israel, things are not going to go well for you. And I want to clarify something, because I don't. Sorry, I'm editing myself. People say, you want to condemn the government of Israel, that doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic. You're right. Thank you, Captain Obvious. You're right. If you condemn the American government, does that mean that you're anti-America? Nobody condemns the Israeli government probably more than Israelis. So it doesn't mean that you can't opine or have an opinion about the policy decisions of the Israeli government. As an American, are you allowed to have an opinion? Sure, but you're not the one fighting and bleeding and dying for your country, nor are our soldiers fighting and bleeding and dying for their country. They've never asked us the same. So you can absolutely criticize the nation of Israel, its policies, what have you. That doesn't make you anti-Semitic. But when you are holding Israel to a standard that you don't hold any other nation to, including your own, then you might be an anti-Semite.
All right. Thank you, Sandra Hagee Parker of Ku5 for shedding some light on this issue.
Thank you so much, Emily, for having me.
And now, the good, the bad, and the ugly of this week. The good news today is that even the most chaotic corners of American politics may finally be waking up. President Trump has now publicly called Marjorie Taylor Greene a lunatic in a new post and announced that he will support a primary opponent against her. And honestly, it's about time. This is the same member of Congress who once blamed wildfires on Jewish space lasers. She's also built an entire career around internet conspiracies. She also loves to brand herself as America First, yet she focuses obsessively on Israel and aid to Israel, even though 99.7% of that aid is reinvested in the U.S. economy through defense contractors and joint security programs. That is not an economic burden, that is an economic multiplier. In fact, the entire U.S. foreign aid budget is only 3% of the U.S. annual budget. So what exactly is she fighting for? Her claims of patriotism evaporate the moment facts enter the conversation. And now even her own political allies are saying out loud what everyone else already knew. She is not a serious legislator. She's a professional agitator who turned Congress into a conspiracy carnival. Next up, the bad story of the week, Dave Smith, who recently appeared on Konstantin Kissin's Trigonometry podcast and arrogantly proclaimed that the Islamic Republic doesn't pose a threat to any of the Sunni Arab nations. Take a look.
I flat out reject the idea that Iran is an existential threat to any of those Sunni states in the region. But Saudi Arabia, who are we talking about? Jordan? Egypt? Like
UAE? I mean, if you speak to people in those countries...
Yeah, I'm sure they're concerned about them.
They're very concerned.
Yes, of course. And there's a Sunni Shiite beef that's been going on for many, many years. And there's a lot. But the idea that, like, the U.S. sock puppet states over there are really threatened by Iran, I just don't think is right.
They do feel that.
Yeah, okay, fine. But, like, I don't think they're right about that. I don't think Iran is taking over Saudi Arabia. Like, what do you mean existential threat here?
Yeah, I think Saudi might like a word. Seriously, though, this is a prime demonstration of how American comedian Dave Smith, who has never lived in the region nor speaks any languages of the region, has no formal education or experience in anything even remotely related to international relations, history, politics, or religion, knows absolutely nothing about the Middle East, and particularly Iran, yet somehow still maintains the supreme arrogance of a Western-centric imbecile and thinks he knows better than those of us who actually live here. And now the ugly story for this week. The Babylon Bee posted a satire piece on Saturday mocking Megyn Kelly's sudden paranoia about imaginary Israeli assassination plots, playing on the 2024 exploding pagers operation against Hezbollah. They deleted it fast, but Kelly lost it on X, posting WTF, while her allies insisted that satire was a threat. This meltdown comes as parts of the American right increasingly fall down conspiracy rabbit holes, just like the baseless theories surrounding Charlie Kirk's death. But the real ugly here is Megyn's hypocrisy. She bashed Mark Levin this week for criticizing Tucker Carlson, yet refuses to condemn Candace Owens' open Jew hatred because, quote, she's a young mother. Tucker, she says he's a friend, so apparently friendship trumps calling out neo-Nazi rhetoric. She even mocked Mehdi Hassan when someone joked about pagers with him. Yet when she is mocked by a satire site, no less, she collapses. The right is turning into the very snowflakes that it used to mock. Well, that's it for this week on Axis of Truth. We'll be back soon with more interviews and more stories from the Middle East. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. Thank you for watching and see you next week on Axis of Truth.
And now moving on, for decades, Jewish National Fund USA has been investing in the northern part of Israel, working to bring thousands of people back to the region. Now, one of their new unique ventures will bring a totally new skill set to the region with a culinary institute. Last week, I sat down with CEO Russell Robinson about what this could mean for Israel.
If you look out, close your eyes, open them, you're in Tuscany.
this is a magnificent, beautiful nation, and here's a magnificent, beautiful area of the country.
The breathtaking views of northern Israel can oftentimes make you feel like you're in another part of the world. When you are here on Kibbutz Gonen, tell me what this feels like for you as someone who's so involved in making sure people do come back to the north.
I see the beauty and the life and the tranquility, all the things that maybe you don't use in words in describing anything in Israel sometimes. You can literally hear cars driving from miles away because it's so quiet. The animals and the beauty of the area and the tranquility of it. And you see from the people there's a spirit of Hautzim. These are people that helped build this nation from the very beginning. And then you get to see that, you know what, when you plant, you can see the fruits of your labor.
For Jewish National Fund USA CEO Russell Robinson, he's had a vision to continue to turn the north of Israel into thriving communities before and after October 7th.
For us, it was always about go north, bringing people up north. October 7th and the war, we had to, shift, but not change. We had to pivot, but we're still heading forward. And we're heading forward that we are bringing people back home.
Bringing people home and bringing people to the region with new opportunities and putting it on the map. That's the goal of JNF USA. And here on Kibbutz Gonen, in the upper eastern Galilee, there's a vision to bring something new to the table, literally speaking.
Here in Kibbutz Gonen, we started something of a reimagination 7 years ago, to build the Galileo Culinary Institute, the finest institute in the world. Now that's a big statement. You got Cordon Bleu, you got CIA and America Culinary Institute of America. How could we claim to have the finest? I'll tell you how. They're fine opportunities to learn French cooking.
Overlooking the vast farms in the distance and ridge of Kibbutz Gonen sits the soon-to-be JNF's Galilee Culinary Institute.
This building will have our bakery. This building will have our winery. It'll have a beer brewery. You're going to be utilizing the beauty of Israel and the experience of Israel as part of the whole culinary teaching experience. So it's not that you come here and you're going to learn only because what we're going to teach you. You're going to learn from everything that goes on here throughout Israel.
Robinson gave us a tour of where the 12-month program will take place, which will soon transform into all different types of culinary spaces.
So you've just walked in the Galileo Culinary Institute restaurant. This is where the chefs from all over the world that have come here to teach, students who have come from all over the world have come here to learn.
JNF USA also established brand new dorms on the kibbutz for culinary students to live in. Robinson met with crews to tour the nearly finished product, where he was able to see the sleek designs and eco-friendly spaces.
So every dorm will have a little kitchenette, refrigerator, a kitchenette, a microwave. Okay, and every bed has storage underneath as well.
JNF USA envisions the Culinary Institute to be instrumental in bringing more life to the ever-growing city of Kiryat Shmona and its surrounding communities. With their investment in entrepreneurs, medical facilities, to pre-military programs in the region and more, the nonprofit is hoping the area expands with each opportunity that's created.
Israel tomorrow is what Israel's all about, a light up to nations, and it's going to be that place that people are going to say, wow, I should have bought a home there before.
What an exciting moment to be on Kibbutz Gonen, seeing so much to come for them.
Leket Israel is the largest food rescue operation in Israel today. We have the honor of having Leket Israel founder Joseph Gittler and Chen Herzog, the chief economist at BDO, here in our studios to explain what food rescue is and how it can help reduce food waste in Israel. Let's take a look.
A new decade summary report from Leket Israel and BDO shows both the dramatic progress of the last 10 years and the enormous challenges that remain. A decade ago, Israel had no national policy on food waste. Today, after years of pressure from Leket Israel and cooperation with the Health and Environment Ministries, Israel finally has its first national plan to reduce food loss. Still, the cost is staggering, 211 billion shekels in wasted food over 10 years, while 1.5 million Israelis face food insecurity. Joining me now are Joseph Gittler, founder of Leket Israel, and Chen Herzog, chief economist at BDO. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you.
Hi.
So, Joseph, let me start with you. Take us back 10 years. There was no policy, no national strategy.
Where were we then, and what progress has been made ever since?
So the good news is we now have, as you mentioned, this national policy. There's much more awareness among the population. There's more awareness and interest from the government and different government bodies. And so we're moving in the right direction. The problem is that while Israelis are wasting less, this latest report talks about less waste, going from 300 kilos a year per person to 260 kilos. Our population has grown dramatically since we put out the first report, so the amount of food waste is even greater than it was 10 years ago. Leket's grown over the last 10 years, but we're not close to solving this issue. We need a bigger push, and we need a lot more awareness from the population. I would say also, this has to bother people. And if it doesn't really bother people, and it's a shame because it's money in your pocket. When people waste food, sometimes it's hard to envision the environmental costs. It's hard to see down that stream of what it does when food goes to waste. So we need to talk to people about their pockets. And especially, we even see waste among those who can't afford it, which is an incredible thing to see.
And Chen, even with the progress, the country lost 26 billion shekels in food just last year. What does that say about where we stand today?
So we have to understand really the problem or the magnitude of food waste. 39% of the food consumed and produced in Israel is lost, it's thrown away. And this causes economic problem, environmental problem, food security and health problem. So let's start from the economic problem. At the end of the day, food loss really means that we, as civilians, pay more. And this number of 211 billion shekels over the last decade means that every household in Israel, every family, lost 70,000 shekels in the last decade. And it all translates to standard of living. If we throw the food at home, of course it costs us money. But not only the food that we throw at home is costly, because even when food is lost throughout the entire value chain, in the agriculture, in the industry, in the retail shops, it all translates to higher cost of living. And I think we saw this impact, this economic impact, very clearly in the past 2 years during the wartime, because wartime caused more food loss. We couldn't reach many of the fields. There were not enough workers, agricultural workers, to pick up the food, which resulted in costs increasing. So we had more food waste, more expensive fruits and vegetables. And those people with food insecurity, their situation also only worsened. So the economic equation is very simple. Rather than throwing this food away, we should rescue it and feed the needy, and it's a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, you, Joseph, have worked with ministries, you pushed for legislation, and helped shape the new national plan. What still needs to be done to turn this momentum into real large-scale change? So
I don't want to get into trouble with the viewers, but we need to make... I'm going to give an example of a change that we need. You know, I love where I live. I love that garbage is picked up 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. We're a little generous in this country when it comes to some of the things that we do. So, for example, you have countries around the world where to open your garbage can, you need to swipe your credit card, okay? And it's weighed. Now, the most expensive and heaviest things we throw away is actually wasted food. And so we need to change the way we look at garbage. We need to change the way we look at food waste. Food, even with everyone's protest about the cost of living in this country and the cost of food, we don't see much change. People take great pride, which I can understand. Everyone wants to be generous. Everyone wants their tables to be full. And of course, we can't take any chances with not having enough food to feed our population. But like most countries, we're producing way more than we need. And so we need to change things around a little bit in our attitudes towards food and towards waste. And maybe when it becomes a little more expensive, as an example, to waste food, then people will start to take it more seriously.
I understand. It's a very interesting thought. Now, the report links food loss directly to rising produce prices. So I'll ask you, Chen, especially since the war, why is reducing food waste now an economic priority and not just a social one?
So what the report illustrates that food rescue is not only philanthropic work, it's also economics. Because what do? We take food we invested a lot of money, a lot of efforts to produce it, to grow it, and then we take all this value and throw it away. So what actually food rescue does is it takes all this lost value and returns it back to the needy. And the economic equation is that to rescue 1 kilogram of food costs about 1 shekel. But the economic benefit of this food is 3.6 shekels. So we take 1 shekel and we convert it or we enlarge it by 3.6 times.
Joseph, let's close with the bigger picture. What are the real benefits of food rescue for Israel, economically, socially, environmentally? Chen just mentioned some. And after a decade of work, what message do you both want Israelis and policymakers to hear right now?
So what I would like these policymakers and the public to hear is something positive. We see the change. We see the interest. People want to waste less. But we'd like to see the supermarket chains, as an example, offering what we call ugly fruits and vegetables at a discount. The kind of fruits and vegetables we never see, but if they were there and were made more affordable, then people would buy them. As large as Leket has become, we will never be big enough to take care of the need. This is only something the public, with us, and the government can do together.
Well, Joseph and Chen of Leket Israel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want to learn more about Leket Israel, just scan the QR code on your screens now. Nefesh B'Nefesh, together with Israel's Ministries of Aliyah and Integration, of Health, of the Negev Galilee and National Resilience, and the Jewish Agency for Israel, are back again with another MEDEX event, but this time in Australia. The wide range of services and opportunities featured at the MEDEX events highlight just how essential these gatherings are. ILTV's Devil Klein has more.
The MEDEX events are back and bigger than ever. This time it's the Jewish community of Australia taking center stage with the unique opportunity to connect and integrate into Israel's medical landscape. More than 100 physicians attended the MEDEX Australia events as Israel continues to expand its global initiative to recruit top medical talent.
The IMAP, the International Medical Aliyah Program, continues to grow and expand worldwide, and we're now in Australia. It is an honor to be part of this vital program and a privilege to meet such inspiring Olim.
Israel is facing a critical shortage of medical professionals, and the MEDEX events are helping to address that need. These gatherings offer physicians a streamlined, one-stop-shop experience, including credential recognition, job interviews with Israel's leading healthcare institutions, and guidance on grants, licensing, and relocation, all under one roof. The MEDEX events, an initiative of the International Medical Aliyah Program, offers a service unlike any other. And with the inauguration of the Australia MEDEX event, these opportunities are nothing short of revolutionary.
MEDEX has set up some interviews for me to be able to sit. I've been able to do my documents to get notarized. I've met with the Ministry of Health, so MEDEX has organized something that I can come to as a one-off stop, and I'll be ready to make Aliyah next year.
For some, MEDEX is more than just a networking opportunity. It also offers the chance to integrate into Israeli society.
The future for our children is Israel, and I also think that if you're going to integrate into Israeli society, you need to come over, you need to work in Hebrew, and I guess that's the only way you're really going to be able to improve your language enough to be able to fit in life.
Sometimes what sticks the most with the attendees at the event are the fast and efficient services that are usually a headache.
It's been incredibly practical. So just over there, there's 10, 15 different hospitals in Kupot Cholim that we've been able to meet with. So I've met with sort of 5 or 6 of them and gotten a sense of how they work and how I might be able to get a job there one day, and training and all that sort of thing. And I've got my degree with me here, and I'm in line to try and get it notarized as well, which just streamlines the process, which has been really great.
After multiple successful MEDEX events across North America and Europe, the IMAP program aims to expand even further, reaching even the farthest communities like the one down under. Israel's Minister of Aliyah and Integration, MK Ophir Sofer, said he expects the MEDEX events to grow rapidly across the globe. But it's not just the attending physicians that gain something from this event. The MEDEX event showcases another step in reinforcing national resilience, not only in security, but also in health.
At Emunah's Neve Michael Children's Village, one center is offering safety, healing, and hope to some of Israel's most vulnerable girls. Here's the story of how the Teen Girls Crisis Center is changing lives, one girl at a time.
For girls who have endured unimaginable trauma, abuse, neglect, and fear, the road to recovery begins here at Neve Michael's Teen Girls Crisis Center. It's the only facility of its kind in Israel, a safe haven for girls aged 12 to 15 who have been removed from their homes by Israel's welfare services. Led by director Nadia Bobrovsky, the center provides emotional and psychological treatment, psychiatric care, and constant support, all designed to help the girls rebuild trust and find strength.
The first thing we try to give them is the feeling that they are wanted, that we waited for them.
When a new girl arrives, she's greeted not with judgment, but with love, a personalized sign, a small gift, and the reassurance that she is seen and accepted.
We don't judge them, we accept them, and this is the first feeling we want them to get when they come to our center.
Each girl's story is different, but their needs are the same: safety, stability, and someone who believes in them. Many arrive in crisis, scared, withdrawn, and mistrusting of adults. But over time, something changes.
The biggest change that we see in those girls is the ability to trust people, to form a healthy connections that based on respect.
Behind every breakthrough is a dedicated team of therapists, social workers, and caregivers. And behind them stands Amuna, the organization that makes this work possible. For 90 years, Amuna has been at the heart of Israel's social welfare system, helping vulnerable children and families break cycles of abuse and distress. Through education, therapy, and love, Amuna builds lives of purpose and possibility. The Teen Girls Crisis Center at Neve Michael embodies that vision, ensuring that no girl is left to face her trauma alone.
They will get more tools and will be able to use those tools in the future whenever they get to another crisis or will have a hard time.
At Neve Michael, every girl is given the chance to heal, to hope, and to dream again.
Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time. Back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Devo Klein, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. The IDF is striking Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. Guided by IDF intelligence, Air Force jets struck Hezbollah compounds that the IDF says were a weapons storage facility, other strategic posts, and additional terror infrastructure sites. Hezbollah was actively using these sites to plan and carry out attacks against Israel in violation of the U.S. brokered ceasefire, leading to the subsequent airstrikes. And southern Lebanon is not the only area where the IDF is striking terror. A wave of airstrikes pounded open areas near Jenin, where local terror cells were reportedly operating. These recent airstrikes are a continuation of a broader counterterrorism operation in Judea and Samaria that has been ongoing for a few weeks. The IDF is working together with the Shin Bet and Israel Border Police to raid terror hubs, seize weapons, and detain suspects. Just in the past night, IDF troops detained multiple suspects while searching for weapons in the Tubas area in northern Samaria. According to preliminary reports, the IDF and Shin Bet arrested or questioned 60 people. And in an interesting twist, among those detained and later released was Samir Basharat, the mayor of prominent Arab city Tamun. And moving to Gaza, Hamas is reportedly searching for the remains of 2 hostages in the area of Zaytun, but that is not stopping their continuous ceasefire violations. In the past 24 hours, 3 terrorists were eliminated in 2 separate incidents. IDF troops identified terror targets crossing the yellow line into the IDF-controlled areas in both southern and northern Gaza. All terrorists were eliminated either by soldier fire or by directed airstrikes. The terrorists were armed and posed an immediate threat to troops in violation of the fragile ceasefire. These recurring incidents reflect the current situation in Rafah. Dozens of Hamas terrorists trapped underground, hiding in a tunnel on the wrong side of the yellow line, which is controlled, of course, by the IDF. But now Israelis are offering a solution sent through mediators. Israeli officials told Hamas to surrender, disarm, move to Israeli prisons, and later be released to Hamas-controlled Gaza. So far, the gunmen are refusing, and at this point, it's unclear whether Hamas chiefs can even get the message across to these trapped terrorists. And speaking of Hamas, Israeli officials are warning that the terror group is quietly rebuilding its rule in the Gaza Strip and faster than many in the cabinet realized. Senior defense officials told ministers that 13 of Gaza's 25 municipalities are back to full activity, but under Hamas's control. According to reports, Hamas police are redeployed at checkpoints, infrastructure is being repaired, and security sources say the organization has re-established its control in the minds of Gazans. Reports also confirm that Hamas has resumed checkpoint operations and is back to collecting taxes from truck drivers, just as it did before the war. This rapid rebuilding is igniting new tensions between Jerusalem and Washington. The Trump administration is pushing ahead with the next phase of its 20-point plan for Gaza's day after, even as Israel warns that Hamas remains armed, entrenched, and deeply involved in local decision-making. With the U.S. struggling to assemble a multinational stabilization force, Washington is turning to interim solutions that Israel strongly rejects. Defense officials say the conclusion is clear. If the United States does not move to dismantle Hamas, Israel will have to, and according to the IDF, it's only a matter of time before such a plan will be carried out. And to a slightly more positive note, it's Thursday, which means Black Friday is just around the corner, even here in Israel. Israelis are notorious shoppers and definitely the first to claim a good deal, so needless to say, malls should be packed to the brim by tomorrow. Forecasters are expecting massive crowds at some of the biggest malls in Israel. The public has been urged to practice caution and act safely, considering the mayhem that may ensue. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Scan the QR code on your screen for all of the latest updates coming out of Israel. I'm Devo Klein, and thanks so much for watching.
I'm Ladar Greve-Lazi, and welcome to another episode of One on One, a special series from ILTV in partnership with Israel Bonds. In each episode, we sit down with real people with unique perspectives on identity and purpose who are choosing to make a difference and dive into the impact they're having along the way. Today's guest is a multi-talented force in the world of entertainment and a passionate advocate for Jewish life and identity. Jonah Platt is an actor, writer, musician, and producer whose work spans television, Broadway, and beyond. Following the October 7th attacks on Israeli civilians, Jonah launched his most personal project yet, his podcast, Being Jewish with Jonah Platt. Jonah has quickly become one of the most important young Jewish advocates reshaping conversations around Jewish identity. He's a proud supporter of Jewish education and summer camp and a dedicated investor in Israel's future. Quite literally. Jonah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a beautiful intro.
Thank you. So I want to jump right in and take you back, start from the beginning. So you come from a family with deep creative roots. Can you tell us how that shaped your path as a performer and storyteller?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents met in college, and one of the things that brought them together was their shared love of the performing arts. It's something they both had done their entire lives. They're both singers and actors, loved musical theater. And so as they raised their family, me and my 4 siblings, they imbued us with that same love of the performing arts. You know, there are videos of me and my siblings and my cousins when we're all toddlers until we're 16, doing shows in the backyard and performing in musicals left and right. So it's always just been in the water at my house, and it seemed natural to me that I would pursue some sort of path in that arts, performance, entertainment world as an adult.
So just before we continue, I want to give a quick word from our sponsors. Israel Bonds is the most direct and impactful way to invest in Israel's future while also investing in yours. Invest in what matters most to you. Invest in Israel through Israel Bonds. You can scan the QR code now to invest. And fast forwarding, what's been one of the most unexpected things you've learned as the host of Being Jewish?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've been fortunate to learn so much. I've done now, I don't know how many, 75 episodes or something between the long form and the short form. So I've had the opportunity to speak to so many interesting guests from all over the spectrum of Jewish and non-Jewish connection. And on top of that, I speak online to thousands of people every day, Jewish and not Jewish, from all over the world. So to pinpoint sort of one unexpected thing I've learned is kind of tricky. I think, excuse me. I guess nothing sort of catches me off guard anymore. The key and sort of really the key to a lot of what I'm doing on the show and in my general advocacy is trying to keep the door open for a really wide-ranging array of viewpoints and of thinking and of identities. So I guess the one thing that's unexpected, like a certain identity I didn't think I was going to be faced with, are Orthodox American anti-Israel Jews. I didn't have that one on my bingo card, and I've heard from some of them in my DMs, which is fascinating, and we've had some great conversations. So that was a new one. And I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, the thing that would probably be the most pleasantly unexpected is the way that my show has for some people, and I know this because they tell me, become sort of this haven in the landscape of outrage and polarization and doom scrolling. I didn't really set out to necessarily be that. I was just sort of doing what I wanted to do. But I've come to learn that it's very few and far between the kind of programs like mine where you can get a break from feeling terrible about things and come and feel a sense of ease and calm and even positivity.
In a world where entertainers are often encouraged to sort of stay in their lane, you've actually chosen to use your platform to speak up, not just as an artist, but as a proud Zionist. I mean, what do you think other Jews in Hollywood can be doing better? And how have your own actions and decisions been received by your industry peers?
That's a big question, right? When it comes to Hollywood and entertainment, what could Jews in that industry be doing differently? And it's a big question because it's not monolithic, right? We're talking about a lot of different kinds of Jews in a lot of different positions. So it's very nuanced. I would say generally, the area where I wish we could be stronger that seems like the easiest lift are with engaged Jews, people who care, people who are connected to the mainstream and global Jewish community, people who love being Jewish, who love Israel, all of that, who have been afraid to take up more space within the industry and use their voice, use their influence, use their position for the benefit of our people in what is essentially a selfish, self-preserving kind of way, but is a way that's, I think, completely legitimate and a way that we see many, many other minority communities doing. You know, we see the Asian American community saying, we need to make more Asian American projects. We need to have more Asian American directors behind the camera and writers in the rooms, and they put an effort into that. They're open about it, and it's a shared goal of that community. I think the fear within the Jewish community in Hollywood, that fear of people pointing fingers and saying Jews control the media, or they're too insular, whatever, all these tropes that, by the way, they say anyways, whether we do it or not. I think the fear of those tropes keeps a lot of people quiet, and the only people that helps are people who want to keep Jews quiet. So I think that's sort of the biggest issue and the biggest fix, the easiest thing that would really move the needle. And there are, of course, exceptions to that. There are people very much so using their positions, their spheres of influence. I just interviewed last night on my show, it'll air in a couple weeks, the producer Lawrence Bender, who, you know, Academy Award nominated producer here in the States, who went to produce a mini-series about October 7th in Israel because it was important to him. You know, that kind of thing is going to be critical if we're going to move the needle at all.
So, I mean, really, as anti-Semitism becomes more visible globally, I mean, what role do you think artists and influencers have or should have in shaping this sort of cultural response?
So I think there's two different answers there, because I think it's different for artists and for influencers. I think artists can actually have a bigger impact than influencers, even though our culture is so obsessed with influencers right now. The way to get to people's hearts is through storytelling. It always has been. That's why we've been doing it since, you know, caveman times. Creating narrative that humanizes Jews in an authentic way, contemporary stories of who Jews are. Because remember, most people on earth really don't understand who or what Jews are, including many Jews, unfortunately. There's no cultural touch points other than what you see on the news or what limited storytelling exists in the film and TV world. It's a lot of historical stuff. It's a lot of sort of tangential stuff. It's not a lot of, here are these great characters, these human characters going through stuff that we all go through, and they happen to be Jewish. And now, without realizing it, I have this connection to Jews in a way that I didn't even intend to. We sort of have to backdoor that in the way, you know, great storytelling does, and helps us get out of ourselves and find our parallels with our own experiences to the characters that we're falling in love with and the journeys we're relating to on screen. So I think putting an emphasis, and again, it comes back to that Hollywood question, you know, it comes to Jewish artists and creators saying, I want to focus my talent and my relationships and my position on lifting up these humanizing, contemporary, totally entertaining on their own merit stories that happen to be about people who are Jewish.
And so you've been very open about your Jewish identity and experiences, especially at Jewish summer camp. You know, how has that influenced your life and your work today?
In terms of being open about it, you know, that's like the heart of everything I'm doing, is I want to model for folks how I think we as Jews need to be moving throughout the world. You know, it's one thing to talk the talk, it's another to walk the walk. And I'm also sort of living proof that not only are you going to be okay if you do it, you know, your world's not going to collapse, but you're going to feel better doing it. You're going to be attracting other people who want to be doing that and care about the same things you do. You're going to feel support. And I think a lot of the fear is, oh, if I take this step, I'm going to lose all the support that I have in my life. But actually anything or anyone you would lose is not real support. It's a model home with nothing inside. You got to step past that, and then you get to the real stuff, the good support, the people who actually care and love and feel the same way that you do. In terms of summer camp, it's been hugely formative for me because of the relationships, really. My best friends are still my camp friends that I met when I was 9, 10 years old. Those are my groomsmen in my wedding. Those are my boys. I also was very fortunate to get to go to camp with my siblings and all of my first cousins on my mom's side and a bunch of second cousins. So we all grew up together every summer, and those bonds and that time together is paying tremendous dividends as adults. We're still so close. Our kids are close. It's really, really a beautiful thing. And then on top of that, camp gave me this Jewish literacy that I would not otherwise have had, because as a Jew in America, you are a minority in a majority country, and you never really get to immerse yourself in just being that identity from sunup to sundown, except when you're at camp, when you get to do it for a bunch of weeks in a row with no break. There's no, going to Jewish day school and then you go to your after school activity and you're out in the world again or whatever. It's just all Jewish all the time. And there's something kind of magical about that you don't even really realize perhaps while you're there, but seeps its way in. And certainly upon reflection as an adult, I see how crucial and what a gift that was.
So if you could send a message to the 9, 10-year-old version of yourself at Jewish camp, or even today a message that you would share with your children, what would you tell yourself or them about sort of pride and purpose?
Wow. Well, 9, 10-year-old me, I guess, you know what? I would tell 9, 10-year-old me what I tell my listeners, and that is to go full Jew. And what I mean by that is, certainly as diaspora Jews, I can't speak for Israelis, though I imagine there's got to be something similar. There's always a voice in us that says this thing that maybe our gut or our instinct wants to do because inside that feels right or feels fun or feels connected. There's that voice that goes, I don't know, it's too Jewy. It's too othery. It's too unassimilated. It's too dorky. It's too fake. It's too made up, whatever it is. But when we ignore that voice and push past it and do the thing our gut is saying, hey, you actually want to do this, like it actually will feel right. It does feel right. It feels great. It feels more in line and authentic and whole. And 9, 10-year-old me definitely had inklings of these kinds of things. My connection to being Jewish as a kid waxed and waned. Sometimes I was fascinated by Pirkei Avot and I wanted to read more. Other times I was ditching prayers at every opportunity I could and trying to not have to do anything that was being asked of me. So just knowing that it's okay to go full Jew and good things will come from it, and you get to sort of set your own meter of where that is. It looks completely different for every different person. It can be something big or small. There's beauty there, and to not be afraid of it.
And so beyond being a proud Jew, you're also a proud Israel bonds investor. So can you maybe tell us what inspired you to become a bond buyer, and why that kind of tangible investment in Israel's economy and future matters to you personally?
Absolutely. Well, like many American Jews, certainly of my age, I was born into Israel bonds, and they all matured, when I was, like 27 or something. I got like 600 letters in the mail of like, your thing's maturing from your bris and from your bar mitzvah. So, we're all aware of Israel bonds. And when I had my own kids, it made perfect sense to me to be able to do a sort of 2-for-1 of investing in their future by putting some money in something for them, and that thing would be Israel bonds. Especially, my daughter was born in 2023, my other daughter born in this past year. It's an important time right now to be doing what we can to invest in Israel, who is going through so much and has so much work ahead to rebuild and to re-nourish its society. And so it's sort of an easy equation for me of putting their money into something meaningful, something that, I can set it and forget it, and something that sort of puts my money literally where my mouth is, in that, we get to tangibly support Israel, the place we love, our homeland, in a way that sanctifies this, rather than just putting it in an index fund or something. For my kids and for their future at this level, it feels more meaningful and purposeful and intentional to do it in such a way that we're really paying it forward to our own people as well.
So, this series also explores Israel's unexpected allies. And so I want to ask if there's anyone who's surprised you by standing with Israel or with the Jewish community in ways that you maybe didn't anticipate.
Well, as Jews in this situation, I think most people would agree, like every ally that stands up, you're like, oh my God, there's an ally there. Like everyone sort of feels surprising because there's so much hate, and it should be the reverse, right? But we're just so grateful for every single person who stands up. I think two people, I could name so many, and I've been blessed to have so many fantastic allies in my life and on the show. Speaking on the show, I'd say the two, well, I'll give you one of each, one from the life, one from the show. In life, John Ondrasik of the music group Five for Fighting, as he's known. Not surprising that, he's a great person, but surprising of how important the issue, especially of the hostages, became to him, and speaking out about this stuff, where he's, performing songs and doing re-releases and concerts and reaching out to people, all to try to uplift that story when he absolutely didn't have to. That's really been amazing. And then the other one I would say, and again, not really surprising when you know the guy, but surprising to the degree to which he has put himself out there and called balls and strikes, is Van Jones, who I have had the pleasure of having on the show and have had the pleasure of being in collaboration with on a number of bridge building endeavors, specifically between America's Black and Jewish communities. And he has been an unbelievable ally, publicly, privately, doing the work, saying what needs to be said, trying to influence others, trying to do exactly what we've talked about earlier in this interview, using his relationships, using his sphere of influence to really intentionally make something happen for these two groups specifically who, as he will tell you, good things happen in this country only when the Blacks and the Jews are working together to make those things happen. And he really cares about that deeply. And he's been absolutely incredible on all things Jewish and Israel.
Yeah, I think you're right that the Jewish community especially really is always a little bit surprised when there are non-Jewish allies standing by, and very grateful and supportive of that. And so continuing along that line, is there any sort of story or encounter that maybe you have that,